Hello, hello, hello. Um, Hold on a second. There we go. Welcome, welcome. Um, I have a little frog in my throat this like entire week. Somebody on a previous when I did a previous recording with Carmine, everyone's like, Preston, your voice sounds different. I was like, I think it's because you got me in the morning. But then again, I record like I do the streams every morning, so I don't know. My kid's been sick, but that's about it. Preston, what do you think of the new GOT series? That's so Blood Raven. It's too bad that I used the That's So Damon joke in the um, House of the Dragon watch, but That's So Blood Raven does fit a lot more. Anyway, welcome, welcome. Live for that echo. I have echo cancellation on. um the so okay. I don't know if anybody's hearing echo, but welcome, welcome. I was doing some thinking about Bran and um obviously just kind of from writing the Bran chapter, but also like thinking back to Game of Thrones and whether or not Bran as king makes sense. Now, obviously, like in a world where Bran has time travel abilities and telepathic abilities to control people's minds and things like that, all of that he can manipulate anybody he wants and shift time around and make things um, pretty crazy to put himself on the throne. But that's the book. So in a sense, it makes sense in the book that Bran can do whatever he wants because he's gonna keep time traveling and manipulating people's minds with dreams or whatever in order to get himself there. That's completely possible. But going back to the show, I was trying to think of like any real reason why, um, and coming up with reasons why Bran would be on the throne, right? Because like this is a world where and relating to that, like if the book were like the show, like things going against Bran. So like obviously like there's no succession reason why Bran would be on the Iron Throne. Like there's no reason that the Starks would would be on the Iron Throne. I mean you could kind of argue, okay, in this R plus L equals J sort of sense, like John, you could say, oh, John is on the throne and then he dies, and who's his closest relative? Well, his closest relative is Bran, and so he would somehow succeed him. Um, it's a bit of a stretch, but considering that there's other people around, but I suppose one could make that argument that if John were considered the legitimate ruler by the entire realm, that Bran being his half brother would might be the next in the line to succeed him. Um, that might work. Religion wise, it's a little weird that because he's not of the faith of the seven, so they would have to kind of be cool with him. I mean, I suppose maybe he could push that he was raised um, with because of Catelyn, he was raised in the faith of the seven as well, and so he's like the unity candidate. Like I worship both the seven gods and the North or something like that. Popularity, like in a sense, like could he be like loved by the people? So far in the story, people really seem to be against people that are disabled. So he is crippled, and that seems to be a big thing against him. Um, Also, he's going to be way too young in the book, way way too young, and so there seems to be like, he would have to have a regent, right? Um, so like in a sense, like it's just Tyrion going to be his regent, but then everybody hates Tyrion too, so it's kind of weird that in that sense. So maybe he'd be king with a regent above him, and then he has no experience ruling. He can't really travel. He he's not really well known. Like everybody'd be like, "Who's this kid? Like, why would you all of a sudden want like this kid and everything?" But I suppose if you could like somehow push the fact that like maybe all of the different parties are even, and no one wants to put a Dornish candidate forward or a Tyrell or a Lannister, and they're like, okay, who is the least disagreeable person? And they're like, oh, well, Bran is the least disagreeable, and he's gonna die anyway, or something, or you know. But then it all has to do with his hand. That's the weirdest thing, is that he would need a regent. So we're not even like choosing Bran in that sense. He's not even in control at book's end. Um, Dragon Demands is like, did it honestly never occur to D&D that within the same finale they hype up the Iron Throne as the institution is destroyed, but then simultaneously Bran is king? This is a big problem, and this is the big problem with all of the original R plus L equals J like fanatics from the beginning, is that clearly the story is telling us that monarchy sucks. And then at the same time, and they're like, and that, but at the same time, these people are like, but John's going to save the world, and John's going to be like the good king. And you're like, really? He'll be the one good tyrant, he's going to be the one good tyrant that's going to save tyranny. Uh, and so, fundamentally, like, I do think that John sitting the throne is one of the least George things ever, and yet that was pushed for so long by people. Like it was just almost like laughable that all people talked about was like this Aragorn principle of John sitting the throne in the end, of he's going to save the world. Um, um, yeah, there could be a time skip. Like there's some sort of time skip. Like the war has been going 5 years, and then after the war finished, they finally have um a great council or something at the end. Like, you just kind of, there's skirmishes for a long time, and then they flash forward to like, well, we've been fighting for 5 years and there's been no king. But yeah. But that's the electable king thing is always the thing. Like, I mean, they do address that in the show, that Bran isn't going to father any kids, so there's no succession and there's no stability. Um, and so in that sense, like having a temporary, like people should be thinking, oh, when's this kid going to die, and then what should we do? We should start preparing for when this is going to happen. And I guess this reminds me of Fire and Blood, where Rhaenyra is heir, but everybody's preparing for war, thinking that like, oh well, we know it's going to happen. Like we know war is going to happen when um, when Bran is going to die. So in a sense, you really need something more revolutionary than even probably the show had. Where, I mean, electable king. I guess maybe that would be fine, but hmm. It'll take Bran 5 years to get south to King's Landing. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that. Like, okay, so try to even getting Bran to King's Landing or close to it by book's end. You've got to have him escape the in Winds of Winter. We need to have him escape the pit, and then get at least as far as the wall, maybe further, like by the end of the Winds of Winter. You kind of need him to get out of the cave and get back to the wall. And then from there, I suppose he can jump a ship. He can hop a ship at Eastwatch. And then that'll take at least a third or of the final book, and then he gets down to King's Landing or something. But he needs to get into the action. Um, Sansa Arya's kids would be next in line. I mean, after Bran, they would put Bran first, right? Because male succession. um, comes before. Like there's not equal sex. There's not equal sex succession. So like Jon dies, they'd be like, who's next in the line? And they're like, okay, we got no Targaryens left, so we go to the Stark side, and then we say, okay, Jon, he had no full siblings, so you go to his half siblings, I suppose, for the case, and then Bran is the eldest male because Robb is dead. So I suppose you could make an argument that Bran is Jon's heir. Um, where is Witcher podcast? This is a big thing about Carmine. So forever, because Carmine was super super into Witcher, super 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 into Witcher, and so I pushed him for many years. Like, we need to do a Witcher podcast. I went and I watched Witcher. Let's do it. He had such a sour feeling about Witcher the show that he just didn't want to do it. Like, it was really weird. It was like an emotional issue for Carmine that he just like didn't want to address. He didn't want to talk about it. It was very very odd, very very odd. We'll have to ask him about like his emotional thing. And now, like, I don't know. I suppose Good Witcher is over. So, um, Bran is his cousin. Nonetheless, I suppose not real. I mean, if you're accepting R plus O equals J, they're not. Yeah, he's not really his half brother. It's his cousin, which I suppose is still the closest in the succession. I'm trying to think of anybody. I mean, besides like young Griff, the implication here is that Daenerys is dead, young Griff is dead. Um, the thing, I mean, there would be other there'd be other people that'd be like vying and saying that they have right to it, because Bran would be pretty far. I mean, a cousin on the mother's side to the king, like that's pretty far. So they might be like, well, Daenerys's Daenerys's husband, whoever he is, or something like that. You could probably have any, Long Waters or whatever. A lot of people could claim it. Estermonts could probably claim it. You'd have a fight. You'd have a fight. You'd have a fight. Um, Justice for Benjen. See, the thing is like Benjen can show up, but he's still in the he's still in Night's Watch, right? So I mean, so is Jon, right? So I suppose you could make the argument that if Jon is out of his Night's Watch vows, then Benjen can just get out of his Night's Watch vows, and then Benjen is gonna sit the throne as regent. Would that be a weird ending? Benjen as regent? I don't know if they would go with two Starks. Um, Theory: War of the Ninepenny Kings Part 2. Post-war Westeros, colonized by the Free Cities, unified Seven Kingdoms broken up. Citizens get some level of democracy. Quote. Um, yeah, that'd be something. Uh, the thing is, you'd have to have like one of the better Free Cities like be in charge, because the other Free Cities suck, right? Like, other than Lorath, Bravos, and Pentos, and even Pentos is shaky there, right? But the other ones all have slavery and stuff, and they're completely corrupt. Maybe the Ibonese. I don't know what it like. Maybe the Ibonese would be okay. Like, if we could get Ib, like, to like they end up ruling Westeros in the end. We have no idea if like Ibonese society is any good. What did the World of Ice and Fire say? Did they even have anything about Ib? This is the more like the less the city had to do with the main story, the more in the World of Ice and Fire there was. Um, I don't know. Nothing really in there about like their politics or anything. So they wrote nothing on Ib. That's too bad. We need some more on Ib. We need an Ib chapter. Too bad there are no characters close to Ib. I mean, the closest, I suppose, like Arya and Daenerys, if she's heading to Vastoth Rock, like that's the closest to Ib. It's too bad. It's too bad. We need a freaking Ib. We need some Ib. More Ib. I mean, I'm bringing back again the Brave Companions. Uh, one of the surviving Brave Companions is Ibonese. So we could definitely have more on Ib from his perspective. If he can talk, the Ibonese seem to be really bad with the uh, common tongue. Um, but yeah, let's see. You have to get. Would the Bravosi be okay? I mean, they at least they have elected kings, no slavery. Their only their big problems is that they seem to allow um, death cult religions and stuff around, but the Ibonese may not be Homo sapiens. You're a racist. You're a racist against Ibonese. Okay, you're racist. Um, it was supposedly a Lovecraft setting. I've read some Lovecraft, but I don't know a Lovecraft very well. So, uh, but I think the doom that came to Sarnoff, it's mentioned, um, which is but other than that, I don't know. I don't know like how it's been mentioned or whatever. But yeah, it's weird how like Lovecraft is one of those things that like every writer seems to keep referencing, but like few people have actually read Lovecraft. So I mean I've read some of Lovecraft, but it's just, it's not yeah, Tog Joff is the guy. He's gonna be. I feel like because like the Ibonese like don't have enough representation, the Tog Joff is gonna survive a long time, have a big role. Um, Transition from feudal society to another mode of social production, monarchy retained via institutional reconfiguration, Glorious Revolution versus French Revolution. For a long time, I was thoroughly convinced that George was basing like Ice and Fire off of the philosophies of Plato's Republic, and in which Plato's Republic is essentially uh, people sit there and debate like which political system is the best. They go through them all, which them all like there's like five, and they debate like monarch like tyranny versus democracy versus and they eventually determine that enlightened monarch is the way to go. That they all believe that like democracy eventually leads to tyranny because the people are dumb and they're going to elect a tyrant who will just take over. And so they have this like this very pseudo scientific, when I say pseudo scientific I mean like Freud. There's no like proof or any of this. It's not based on any data. It's just like armchair like ideas of like how each thing evolves into the other. Like, well, of course democracy leads to tyranny. Like everybody knows that. That's just a logical conclusion. Like how is that the case, Um but nonetheless, I was fairly convinced of this because when you actually like look at Stannis, for example, you can see different ideas about like justice and how to rule. And when you look at like how young Griff is raised, it's this whole like enlightened monarch kind of way. So like the whole thing in Plato's Republic was they would have a colony of enlightened monarch like a training system where they like teach all of these people hardship and what it's like to rule and like and everything. And the idea like looking at that I was like, oh my god, that's like young Griff. Like he's like it's the whole speech of Varys at the end, or in another sense you could say that it's like Daenerys or Jon. That there's this long process that their experiences lead them to becoming the best rulers. And I was convinced, and then I asked George about it and he was like, He was like, I read it in college. I don't know what you're talking about. I was like, okay. And so I was like, oh, what was that about? But then I found out later that C.S. Lewis actually did base writing off of Plato's Republic, and because C.S. Lewis's writing is so influential to fantasy, the fantasy genre in general, that it kind of that perhaps it was just that it bleeds naturally into the themes of fantasy literature. Um, but it may have just been me like looking and seeing things that weren't there. After I asked George, somebody immediately was like, dude, death of the author. Like, dude, like if you think it's there, it's there. Like it doesn't matter. I was like, okay. Um oh no, don't look up Lovecraft's cats. Oh god. Well, that's just a oh god. Why was Lovecraft such a horrible human being? Ugh. Lovecraft was an absolute, even though he's beloved uh fantasy writer and really influential, he was a horrible racist, like a horrible racist. And which is kind of what the series Lovecraft Country kind of like grapples with in its themes, even though I couldn't get through it because it's just kind of boring in the end, the show. But yeah, he named some cats uh the N word and stuff. So um why do so many people overlook the clear Manderley Stannis alliance and how strong a well-funded Stannis army will be? I don't think people really overlook that. I think central to the like Grand Northern Conspiracy theories, and whether you like the Grand Northern Conspiracy theories, like I think the first one that came out was kind of ridiculous. Okay, it was really ridiculous because it was actually like all of these people are actually conspiring for Jon, including people in the Riverlands and the Brotherhood Without Banners, and so is Lady Stoneheart. Everybody under the sun like wants Jon to be king secretly in the backstory, and you're like, no, no, no. But it was taking a something that most fans believe is true, that at minimum there is a Manderley Umber alliance. Like at minimum there's a Manderley Umber alliance, and we, whether they're supporting Rickon or Stannis and Rickon or secretly Jon, like people accept that Manderley Umber is there. Like it was established in A Clash of Kings that Robb tells Manderley and Umber to build ships together. We've got these hidden ships. White Harbor is the biggest city in the north, and Manderley brings 300 knights to Winterfell. He also is very clearly anti-Ramsay, anti-Bolton. This is flat out said to people. So, and then the Umbers themselves, like, they send only old men, into Winterfell while the Green Boys are on the outside and stuff like that. So like, and we actually know that Moore's Crowfoot is fighting for Stannis. We like know that as a fact. So like, it's pretty clear that there's a Manderley Umber alliance. Like now, whether you want to throw in all the rest of the Northerners, whether Lady Dustin's on board and the Serwins and the Glovers. Well, we know Robert Glover is, but like, whether you want to throw in like Flints and Locks and all these different people, that's another thing. But it's 99% that there's a Manderley Umber conspiracy. Because we're flat out told this in the Davos chapters, and it all leads from the Clash of Kings seeds, right? So Manderley didn't bring any forces to Winterfell. He has to have an army of at least a few thousand. I'm not, I don't know if it's going to be like 6,000. It might only be like 2 or 3,000, but he's got an army of thousands. Um, so after the battle at Winterfell, where you've got essentially an army of 5,000 versus an army of 5,000, more or less, Manderley is going to have like the strongest army in the north, other than the wildlings. Wildlings dwarf everything. So, um, like the Weepers wildling army dwarfs everything. So like it's funny how much time is actually spent on Northern conspiracies and everything. And keep in mind, I spent a lot of time studying Northern conspiracies, but when you actually look at the numbers, oh yeah, the Weeper is totally like overwhelmingly stronger than everybody else. So, but yeah, um, Manderley does have lots of money. He's got some men. They've got these ships. Uh, it does seem like you know whoever is going to come on top in the north will have, and who has Manderley's support isn't they aren't it's not nothing, but compared to everything else, compared to the Vale army, compared to the Dornish army, compared to the Tyrell army, compared to the Ironborn, compared to the Wildlings, they're kind of still small. So I do, if we're talking about a Stannis resurgence or a John resurgence, you kind of need like more building. It would, he's going to need more than just the Manderleys. It's going to start with that. It's going to be small, and then it's going to build and build and build. Maybe getting the Weepers army or whatever. But those ships are the ships are going to be important though. They're going to be very, very important. It's just that they're on the wrong side of the world. Those ships. The thing is like, and so there's another thing is that originally the Freys were going to not march north, but going to take ships north, and so it sounded like they were going to take out the Freys at sea. And now the Freys, are going to be probably taken out, on land. But we still have these ships that need to come back into the story. The thing is like all of the ships in story are in the Red Wine Straits right now. And so what are you going to do? Like, what's the function of the Stark ships, or the Manderley Umber ships, I should say? Like, what are we going to do with them, and how are they going to be useful to the story? I don't know. I mean, just them like sailing to a place where you can do battle, just them getting to King's Landing is like half a book. Oh well. Oh well. Answer to video title is no. I expect all kind of magic to disappear at the end of the story, including Bran. I see him die trying to stop the Night King. Yeah, it all depends on like George's original plan versus like what he would do later. Like I don't necessarily see, like, maybe in George's original plan, and I think it's pretty clear in George's original plan he wanted Bran to sit the throne, as like this little disabled broken boy who eventually rises to save the world in both a time travel sense, but also saving the world in like somehow this enlightened ruler who's going to like change the political system. But now, like, will he be able to actually get to that point? This is, keep in mind, George wrote himself into a corner, and has spoken many times about how Bran chapters are his hardest to write, and how he doesn't know what to do at various points. Carmine and I did a little podcast that'll be out this week about how he admitted to one of his friends that he killed somebody that he shouldn't have killed, and he doesn't know how to resolve that and things like that. So it's very difficult. Like, okay, how am I going to make a 10-year-old boy who's crippled, like ruler of the world. Like, that's like a believable story. It would need a lot of magic. It would need a lot of time travel. But if Bran dies, like who then becomes like the good-hearted character who's gonna like see things through? And I'd say like Sansa is your probably your opportunity there. Um, if not Sansa, someone like Brienne and Davos. So um, six rules of government. I think I said something like five. Yeah. Why does Bran need to inherit the throne through Targaryen Jon? He is the heir to Robb Stark and the King of the North. He just needs the other lords to swear fealty to him. Because why would the rest of the lords give a crap about the North? That's the essential thing. Like, why would anyone in Dorne, in the Stormlands, in the Reach, in the Westerlands feel like they would want to be a northerner? Like, what is it? I'm not saying you can't get to eventually that point, but man, you'd have to start seeding it now. Um, about like what their link would be, because even, and I would say that like even in a Game of Thrones and a Clash of Kings, like the Riverlands' willingness to follow Jon as King of the North was a little weird. Was like them all celebrating King of the Trident and all of this. Like that was odd. I mean, and they kind of only do it because he's half Tully, and I suppose you could say, well, Bran's half Tully, so maybe the Riverlands would be on board, because we've got a Tully, um, but I just don't see how the rest would get there. You could say Sweet Robin's, he's half Tully, okay, so maybe Sweet Robin, so maybe you get the Vale, and he goes, okay, Sweet Robin's on board. So we've got three of the kingdoms, but you'd have to have like Jane Westerling or something somehow rule the Westerlands, and then she's on board. And then in the Stormlands, somehow Davos is just really impressed. Somehow Davos rules the Stormlands, and he's just really impressed with Bran, or then how do you get the Reach? How do you get Dorne? The thing is, like, especially Dorne, like Dorne gives zero fucks about the North. Like, they give zero fucks. They believe Ned Stark, like, was liable for Elia's children getting killed. Like, how do you get them all the way to following Bran? Oh, just don't know. I just don't know. I don't know about the King of the North thing. If that works at all. I understand that like people get really like, especially in the show, when people are like, yeah, King of the North, King of the North. Yeah, it sounds really badass and people want to be badass, but I don't know. Even the show's end seemed a little weird. I knew a lot of fans that really said this is ridiculous. Like, why would the realm accept three Starks to essentially rule them? Jon being the king of the wildlings, Sansa being the queen of the North, and Bran being the king of the other kingdoms. Like, especially when like the North seceded, why would they follow Bran? Like that, and like the North seceded. Like, go home, Bran. Go rule your North. It rule us. It was really weird that like that anyone would let that happen. Um, House Plum is the true heiress of the Targaryens. There's an argument to that. I mean, there's an argument to it. There's an argument to a lot of different houses. I mean, you've got, if there's like one, you could claim Velaryons. Velaryons could always claim that they're the heir to Targaryens because of so many intermarriages. And then you could claim, let's see, there's the Long Waters, the High Towers, have some marriages and some kids um, in there. The Dornish, the Martells, um, the Danes. There's a lot of people that could claim Targaryen, the true heirs to Targaryens. The Estermonts, um, and whatever Baratheon is alive. Anybody could do it, but of course, like looking for blood, like succession through blood, is of course like the wrong answer. Like I understand it's really fun for all of us to be like, well, who's actually the true king? In real life, no one really cared that much. It was kind of whoever had power. And George's message is specifically, this is a really bad system to determine who's going to be king. you know, um, hey Preston, I'm 32 and just started losing my hair from the front. Was wondering if you have any tips for overcoming this travesty, not feeling optimistic, to be honest. Um, and this is the big thing about losing it from the front versus the back. So like if you're losing it from the back, you can just use right like the minoxidil, right? I think from the front, if you're really concerned, you can take the pills, the Propecia pills, but like um people have told me that they make it harder to get an erection. Some people have this problem, some people don't. Um, but in a general sense, like if you're going behind, beyond the I don't want to lose my hair period. Just cut your hair short and just own it. Like the thing is at the end of the day, I understand that you're still young and it's still a little bit of. Hold on a second. My wife is okay. Um, it feels like it's this big deal. Um, but luckily, and here's the thing. This is really key. Luckily, women are not as shallow as men. Okay, you want to. I understand I'm being like incredibly like stereotypical here. Women are not as as petty as men. They are not like men. We really care about whether our partner is good looking. We do. Women, they care about how successful you are, how funny you are, how nice you are, how confident you are. Oh, like, oh God, they love the confidence. You know, your hair is just one of many things. Like they don't and the thing is I understand that like you're going bald a little early and that's a little different than being 42 and going bald because like at 42 all the other men are fat and bald too anyway, so it doesn't matter. But I understand 32 is young. I feel for you. But like, just cut your hair short. Um and just remember that women don't care. Like they don't care. Like there's so many also the other thing is you're 32. This is like you're entering the golden age of men dating. The golden age. Because let me tell you, when women start approaching 30, they're immediately like, gotta find somebody. Biological clock, things are ticking. And so you're like, you've got your pick of the litter. Okay? There's so many people out there. There's so many great people out there. And you're like a pro, they're all in this like desperate age, like oh my god, gotta find somebody now. So like just on the sense of like where you are in life, you're in a really good place. And so it's not that big a deal. Hair, women don't really care that much. They like, they care if you're intelligent and confident and successful and all these other things and have a good personality. Like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about the hair. Like, so many guys, like, they spend all day, like, pumping iron at the gym thinking, like, women care about pecs. They do not. They do not, Um, so, I don't know. you're gonna be fine, dude. Like, you know how many hot women I know, like, that are married to bald dudes? Like, it's not an issue. Like, plus, like, there's people like Jason Statham who like look better bald than he did like with hair. Um, so anyway, that's all like like the bro talk, and I'm sorry to women that I've like completely stereotyped like, yeah, everybody, but man, like, being a 32-year-old man, if you're successful and intelligent and you're 32, oh my god, the world's your oyster. The world's your oyster. There's so many women out there, because you got to remember, most men are fucking pieces of shit, dude. They're either like lazy or like angry or sexist or just not successful in life or dumb. Like, oh my god, like, all you have to do, like, to make it in this world as a man, all you got to do is, like, honestly, like, just jump this low bar of like not being not being a piece of shit, like this incredibly low bar, like, oh my god, don't be a piece of shit, and then all of a sudden there's just like so many wonderful women that are like in this world, like for you. Like, that's all you got to do, is not be an absolute piece of shit. Like, it's such a low bar, you're gonna have such a fucking great blessed life that you don't have to worry about it, dude. Like, you don't have to worry about it. Like, shave your head, be confident, own it. When people are like, "Oh, you're bald," you're like, "Yeah, who cares?" Like, fuck it. There's so many, there's so many wonderful people out there. Um. Anyway, what do you think of Bran or John as a Cincinnatus character that takes supreme power, gets the job done, and then gives the power back? Possible? I think that's more or less what's happening, right? Um, right, because he's like doing all this institutional change, and then he's planning on dying. Like, he's not real, like, at least, show. Um, this idea that like he's gonna pass away, and then like they're gonna elect a new king. I mean, granted, like, not all the reforms are done. They don't have popular democracy yet, but um, it's I think that's like more or less what's gonna happen. Um, I mean, if I were gonna end the story, I would have, like, yeah, somebody like Bran or Sansa rule at the end, make institutional changes, and then you have an epilogue that's like fast forward in the future. I would have it from like a female Frey, like a Frey perspective, like a girl who's like studying at the Citadel or something, and talking about like how great the world is and how they thankful for all the sacrifices that people made or something. Very similar to the end of Fever Dream. I'd take the last if you've ever read the Fever Dream, you know it ends, and then there's an epilogue that's many years in the future about how things are better, and it's sad because the characters are all dead now, but like, um um but yeah, I think it's something like that. Now, Cincinnatus, by the way, um let's see here. Cincinnatus lived during the Roman Republic, not the Roman Empire, the Roman Republic period. Um, I'm trying to see specifically what he did here. Um, he served as dictator from 58 to 57. So one of the weird things about um, the Republic is that they had a system where the consul would rule for 6 months. And so when if you ever read Roman history, they don't say the year. They don't say, like, because they didn't Christ isn't born yet, so there's no, like, AD 500 or anything like that. But they would say, like, during the consulship of Gaius Plebeius, whatever, and that's how they told time. The Greeks would say during the whatever Olympics, like during the second year after the whatever Olympics, they told time that way. But they would say like during the council of whatever. But these councils, as a senator, like essentially ruled for 6 months. But every once in a while, there was a crisis during the Roman Republic where they rule just a little bit longer, just a little bit longer. Um, and that was a problem because sometimes they ruled like a year, and then there was this guy Sulla who ruled 2 years and then gave up his power. But the problem is that that kind of broke the back of the system, and so you're like, well, dictatorship's fine in moment of crisis. So then when Julius Caesar came around and became dictator, he was dictator 6 years with no sign of like giving up his dictatorship, so he was assassinated. And then you know the whole system changed, and the emperors came in. Augustus, he was, they called him Princep, but he was emperor anyway for almost 40 years. But yeah. So the idea is that so it was this tradition of like fixing things as dictator in the republic and then handing back power, like Sulla or whatever. But doesn't matter if Stannis is dead. Well, we'll see if Stannis dies. I don't even know if George knows if if Stannis is gonna live or die or whatever for a while. He's definitely planted seeds both ways, but but it is a thing about like when because everybody sees the North like taken over and being resurgent. And even George's plans when he wants to name the last book A Time for Wolves and things like that, and all these Stark characters. But you really look at the armies and you're like, but they don't have any armies. Like they don't have any armies. They've been through too many wars. So unless it's like wildlings like stepping in and like being de facto Northerners, Did Show Bran adopt some of Sweet Robin's story as a potential Greenseer king, a temporary peace as they expect him to die? Story begins with Sweet Robin's political importance, ends with it as well. That's a very interesting notion. I like that. I like that a lot. But the story also does begin with Bran's point of view as well. Bran's POV is chapter 1. And it's the first chapter that George wrote. Like he wrote. Keep in mind the genesis of Game of Thrones is that George was working on a novel called Avalon. And then I don't know if this is going to ring a bell, but he was working on this novel called Avalon, and which was going to be this like ambitious big novel involving his Thousand Worlds universe that he had established over the course, this complicated Thousand Worlds universe that he'd established over the course of 20 years. He was working on this novel and he got writer's block and he just didn't know where to go with it. So he just all of a sudden started writing this Bran chapter, and he wrote the Bran chapter in like, it was I want to say it was like 92. It was like fairly before he started working like in earnest on the rest of it, which I think was 94. So I think he like wrote the Bran chapter in 92. So like the Bran thing is like well from the very beginning. And I think he also I think the actor that played Bran said that he was on the phone with George once and George told him that he was going to be king at the end. And he was kind of like, his jaw dropped. He tells the story that, oh, really? So, but could there be other aspects of it? Sure. But it's hard to deny that even though Sweet Robin is a very important character at the very beginning of the story, and he's the nature of him is like the first conversation that Robert and Ned have. Bran is the first chapter. He's the most important character. It's interesting to me that the Stark kids are likely the heirs to Harrenhal if Edmure dies, since Hoster Tully's wife was a Went. I wonder if this will come up in the story at some point. Yeah, I've been saying for a long time that it just seems to fit that um, that if you actually go through um, like matriarchal versus patriarchal like lineage, that you kind that there's something interesting to the fact that Brienne is walking around with Oathkeeper and her shield, which has, Dunk's sigil on it, right? And but beneath those, she painted a Lothston shield, and uh, the sword is really ice. So there's something interesting about the fact that there's something with Harrenhal and there's something with Winterfell. There's something with, and when we look at looking, and she's searching for Sansa and Arya, these female Starks. But when you look at female lineage, you go, Lady Went would go to Catelyn, Catelyn would go to Sansa. Like female lineage goes down to the same person, and then we start talking about Danelle Lothston. Like, and when I say like Lothston to Went, it's like they both had bat sigils, and there's this idea that you marry the daughters to continue legitimacy. So like Lothston to Went, and Danelle Lothston had this red hair, just like Sansa, and so there does seem to be something like this Harrenhal Winterfell connection, which is also listed in the just like George's ideas about like bat and wolf, like werewolf and vampire being one and the same. Like if you read Fever Dream, he starts talking about the bat and the wolf, like, and you're just like, it's very difficult to be like, to not think like about Harrenhal and Winterfell as like these twin castles when he's talking about bat and wolf all the time, vampire and werewolf. So it's plus there's a lot of weird moments in the story where they shove in bat imagery to Sansa. So it's I do think it's very interesting that there is this Harrenhal connection to the children, and I do think the story will kind of head that direction, especially with like Frey Civil War and stuff like that. That it's just natural for the Vale Army to come into the Riverlands, and then I think it's fascinating that Littlefinger is Lord of Harrenhal, and so his heir would be Elaine if she were legitimized. And so like there's which is something she like specifically talks about with Sweet Robin, where Sweet Robin says like, oh, um she's like, I can't marry you, I'm a bastard. Well, if you're legitimized, you're not, then and so these issues come up. So I think that Sansa is going to be legitimized, and she'll become heir to Harrenhal, and she'll get Harrenhal, and it's almost like Harrenhal is like coming home again, right? Like she should have it naturally through like Stark connections, but she also is getting it through being Elaine Baelish. Anyway, I think that's just like a fun thing. I mean, maybe I'm reading way too much into it, but I just think it's a very fun way for the story to go. That's true. George R. Martin, patrilineal succession is dumb as fuck. Entire fan base spends a decade arguing about who has the best claim. If only it were a decade. I'm bald since the 20s. It was fine. When is your next PowerPoint style video? I love them. And Time Traveling Bran ending a year ago. I've only done one PowerPoint. Or do you just mean in general like theory videos? I've done one PowerPoint video, and that was on the on the geology, and that was just from a friend of mine asked me to appear to do a speech for a geology conference, and I was like, okay, I think I can come up with something. He thought it'd be kind of fun, but in general, what do I have in the pipeline? I've got a lot of like partially completed videos right now. Like I have a half completed over analyzing. I have a half completed Daemon the hero. I actually was working on a George R. Martin Elden Ring video, and obviously the sample chapters and things like that. It's But things will come. Things will come. I know. Everybody's always wanting more and more videos, and it's just like it's hard. It's hard. Um, I just remember one Sunday afternoon when a 75-year-old grandmother was like, "I think bald men are sexy." It's funny how things go back and forth. Like keep in mind, like for a while, men being completely hairless was a thing, and now I think hair is coming back. But but man, there's so ever since I did the Ironborn Shanty video, um, uh, I was like, online looking for pirate stuff, and the the Pirates of Penzance like came in, right? And keep in mind, the Pirates of Penzance, it's a Gilbert and Sullivan opera that's like 100 years old, but there was a revival in the late 70s, and the revival starred Kevin Kline and the guy who was the first Daredevil ever. If you've ever seen The Trial of the Incredible Hulk, and Kevin Kline plays the Pirate King, and they eventually made it a movie. And I recommend all of you to watch Cat Like Tread. Um, but but this was Kevin Kline in the late 70s, starring as the Pirate King in this. And keep in mind, he's fucking incredible. Um, and but he's just this bear, absolute bear of a man with hair just like look at this hair, and then this like sporting the mustache, and you're just like, whoa. And I'm sure at the time, like everybody's like, oh my God, this is the sexiest man alive. But like today, like people wear mustaches ironically, but who wears mustaches like unironically? But this is, unironically, completely hairy chest, like bear of a man, kind of like sexy. And if you ever like see like, man, like I say, like Cat Like Tread, um, is just a really incredible song, but their rendition of it is incredible too, because they're just like screaming at each other in it. But you're just like, you kind of see like no one would pull this off today or whatever, but like, man, doesn't he just ooze, like I can recognize that he just like oozes sex. Now it's very Burt Reynolds, I realize. It's very Burt Reynolds. Like this is the Burt Reynolds like sexiness of the 70s, and he's taking Burt Reynolds sexiness of the 70s to its like logical to its logical extreme. But like Kevin Kline, like, who we now think of being as a sort of like effeminate, like nice guy, you know, like now today, what Kevin Kline, there's Kevin Kline. But I mean, he got to marry Phoebe Cates, so I guess it just proves. I don't know, people's definition of sex, and that's the thing, is it's not really about. And if you watch like, because if I play Cat Like Tread, they'll flag my video. But like, you watch that and you realize it's not really about the mustache or the hair. It's about the fact that he's so fucking confident. He is so fucking confident that everyone's just gonna. And I understand it's like being confident is easier said than done. Like, how do you just be confident? But it's just like, it's just the thing. If he can pull off mustaches and chest hair, like anybody. How about Bran being king as a metaphor of the children of the forest and the werewood net reclaiming Westeros as their own? Could be a double as anti-colonialism and environmentalism message. Yeah, I definitely, these sorts of things definitely cross my mind. There is I also crossed my mind about whether or not, like, how communist George wanted the ending to be. And I go back and forth on like whether George is a communist or not. George is a bit contradictory in his writing, because on the one hand, his writing is very much about how the system is unfair to people and how capitalism sucks. But on the other hand, he very much loves like individual greatness and like a world where hard work can cause somebody to be successful. Like he likes that too. And so like he will look at poor people who are his friends growing up, and he blames it one on the system, but he also blames it on their own lack of creativity and just resigning to their situation, you know. So he has both, you know. And then of course over the years I think he's become, you know, once he became wealthy, I think he perhaps bought into the system a little more than when he was a starving artist. Um, so I mean, I definitely do think that all of that's there, like Bran being a stand-in for the children and stuff like that. But I played around with the idea in my head, like, could Bran use the werewood net to like actually control everyone somewhat and have all of Westeros be a hive mind? In the same sense that the children of the forest are kind of a hive mind. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a tough ending, and I think it's why George is probably having so much trouble, is that you have to get to a point where you're back at the anti-colonialist balance point, right? Because he's so much against this idea that you can't keep growing and expanding forever. That's not sustainable. Like that's very consistent part of his writing. That the ever expansion of culture, the ever expanding ideology that Catholicism has, Christianity has, capitalism has, America has, this the GDP kind of idea ever expanding is not sustainable. Like he understands that, and that he does think that there needs to be some sort of like weird balance, but how to achieve that is a very difficult thing, because obviously like if people had the solution to that, there'd be a political movement for it, but we don't really have good ideas. You know, all political systems are kind of flawed and suck, so what are we gonna, you know? So he, how does he achieve like perfection in how to rule the world at the end? um yeah, I guess he's got to leave it ambiguous or something a little more. um oh, this is interesting. Consuls ruled for a year, but the consuls would alternate power every month. Okay, okay. So it was like they got 6 months, but it was 6 months over the course of a year. Yeah. um How tall is Carmine? Short below 5'6", average 5'7", 5'9", tall above 5'10". Carmine describes himself as short. I don't know his exact um, height, but he does describe himself as a short man. So I'm going to guess that he's like 5'8". Um, you know, that's my guess. You know what he says. But I don't know if like he's as short as 5'6". Keep in mind, in America, the average height for men is 5'10". It used to be five, or maybe it dropped to 5'9". I think it used to be 5'10" and recently dropped to 5'9", because of immigration. Um, we have shorter people coming in. Um, any theories on Queen Eleanor Castaigne? Let's look this up. I have to get reminded here about. Um, this is one of the right. She was one of the Black Brides, right? So one of the weird things about Magor is for the longest time I just assumed that Magor was completely infertile and that this was an issue. And then later, and then I think in the world of Ice and Fire, you find out that actually one of his women got pregnant, and then and miscarried or something, or stillbirthed, which kind of changes everything with regards to like whether he was sterile or not. And I bring that up because there's this idea of whether or not he was a meta. Like he had XXY chromosomes, and if he had XXY chromosomes, he's not getting anyone pregnant. Um, because people with XXY chromosomes would be, I mean, they wouldn't have a body type dissimilar to Magor, um, but nonetheless, let's see. For Eleanor enjoyed a quiet life with her 3 children. Her first husband, Theo Boiling. Theo was arrested by the Kingsguard Knight, accused of conspiring with Alyssa Velaryon to place Jaehaerys on the throne. He was executed. Eleanor was summoned to wed Magor. Her sons ensured that he would play a part in the ceremony. According to one tale, Eleanor scratched Magor's back, bloody ribbons as they coupled. Eleanor's sons were sent away after the wedding, fostered in different places. And then she gave birth to a stillborn abomination, said to have been eyeless with small wings. Elle was one of the 2 wives who survived the king. Now, when did she... I do wonder now, because she was married before, that maybe she was pregnant when she married. She could have been pregnant when she married Magor, and that the stillborn kid is actually Bolings. I don't know, Bolings. And then reconcile. So then, after Jaehaerys' ascent, Eleanor departed King's Landing dressed in the robes. She visited her sons. So this is the idea that perhaps Eleanor is one of the people that poisoned Magor. We'll probably never know. I guess she had plenty of motivation to do so. And then she went forth and spread the doctrine of exceptionalism to people. To support Jaehaerys' incest. So I mean, I guess my theory, like, there's a lot of things going on here. I suppose we're supposed to think that Eleanor murdered Magor. Completely possible. She seemed to be on good terms with Jaehaerys afterwards. She has motive to do so. I think Eleanor, like, she was probably married by Magor in the first place because he figured maybe she had special genes of some sort based on her lineage, and that's about it. I don't think we're ever supposed to know or going to know about what happened. And as for Server X, like, Server X is just like, when you look at who's in the vicinity to poison the wine or the pie at the wedding, your only options are Server X or the Queen of Thorns. Server X being a person that brings over Tyrion's pie. Like, those are the only people in the vicinity. Unless you want to be like Garland Tyrell, but who freaking cares? It's the same as the Queen of Thorns. So it's either the Queen of Thorns or Server X. Like, logistically, those are the only people in the area, because we know Sansa didn't do it. We know that Joffrey didn't do it. We know that he wouldn't poison himself. We know that Tyrion and Sansa did it because we're in their heads. The only people that are left are Server X and the Queen of Thorns. And so it doesn't, like, Queen of Thorns' story for her being part of the murder is so ridiculously convoluted and stupid. I understand that it's like, hello, how goes it?
Hey man, hello.
All
I'm
right.
good.
I'm let's get back here. I'm just gonna finish
Sorry.
here. But the yeah, so if you're gonna think that it's anybody else other than the Queen of Thorns, they're gonna utilize server X. Now, is it Littlefinger? Maybe, probably, but it's gotta be through server X being the person that delivers it. So what's been happening?
With me?
Yes.
It's okay.
Yeah.
um, I was trying to write an outline for Cersei and Marjorie's trial.
Oh,
Uh,
so one thing to think about with that, and this is actually part of the something that's coming out with me and Carmine did a little uh, podcast about this. But when it comes to Cersei and Marjorie's trials, I realized that there has to be a delay of at least a week um, with regards to those trials. Like I understand that in the and I'm spoiling this video that Carmine and I are gonna talk about. But essentially, like,
Sorry, man.
yeah, no worries. But like, um, realistically, if Kevin dies, you need to have a Lannister in King's Landing to be regent. No one is gonna put Cersei on trial without a Lannister there. That would just be like too much, right? So the idea is that who's going to be regent? It's probably going to be Jenna Lannister. And so you need time for Jenna to get from River Run to King's Landing, which takes like, a week or two. And so I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this is probably like George's like problem that he was talking about because George brings up a problem of killing somebody too soon. But I think that there has to be some sort of like delay. I can't think of any
Hmm.
like logical reason why they're like putting Cersei on trial like immediately when there's not a Lannister. I mean, the only other Lannister is Lancel. You're gonna make
Yeah,
Lancel
no,
regent.
he wouldn't be. Neither the Tyrells nor Cersei would agree with that. So yeah.
Right,
Um,
right. So it's one of these. It's one of these things that that I real like. It's one of the reasons I've been delaying the Cersei chapter because I'm just like, man, nothing makes sense like timeline wise, logistically with like Cersei's trial and everything. Um,
yeah,
but yeah.
I was having I, I was having just it's yeah, I did not think of that. One thing that I did was like I was trying to think of I think that a scene of Kevin's funeral and
Mm,
Cersei talking with Lancel would be interesting, like before the trial.
that would
Uh,
be very interesting. And then it also like I think it also give an excuse for like for the delay as well. Like, oh well, we have to have a funeral for Kevin, all sorts of things. We've got to wait for Jenna Lannister to get into town. Um, but I think of the choices, Jenna Lannister is just like the most interesting regent that could possibly be chosen. Um, but uh, but man, by the way, for people that don't know, Vitor is one of the editors that I consult with on fanfic stuff. I'm pronouncing your first name correct. It's Vitor.
Whatever.
Oh no.
I don't care. I literally don't care.
Okay, okay. What do you tell your friends?
Vitor?
Vitor.
Yeah,
Okay,
something like that.
okay, okay.
We don't pronounce R's the same, so but it's okay.
Gotcha.
uh,
Vitor.
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
something like
all
that.
right. I'll
But
try to get
I
it.
don't care. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care at all.
Yeah, yeah. But last week we spent some time like editing Bran some. I think it's in a good place. But
It
obviously,
is.
like to see where the other editors go with it. But But yeah, Brand's been taking forever, but it has to take forever because Brand has to be good. You know, Brand has to be done right. Um, Daniel says here, I wanted to apologize if I or any other members in the community have been toxic or rude. I love the content the community you've built. Thank you. Um, so this is coming. I think this is coming from this week. Quinn from Quinn's Ideas. He used to have his channel used to be called Ideas of Ice and Fire. He posted that the A Song of Ice and Fire community is like super toxic um, and that the reason he started his channel is because he like people weren't willing to talk to him about ideas, which is actually the reason I started my channel and things like that. Um, and now his channel is enormous because he talks about sci-fi in general and Dune and stuff like that. Um, and so I tweeted back at him like, yeah, you're not wrong. But I think that that's not like our community. I mean, I think one of the reasons why I have a certain community is that they enjoy um, the uh, the the tone and attitude of like this section of the community. The obviously the Song of Ice and Fire community is enormous, and you're going to get all types. And so yeah, I think, and it's a little unfair because you could probably take any community and be like, well, that's a toxic community, because every community in the world that has like a certain number of people in it is going to have like toxic elements. So like, what is the Star Wars community going to be not toxic? Is the Marvel community not going to be toxic? Like any community is going to have toxic elements to it. But what's fun about like, I don't know, the the uh the circle we've created here is that we've got we don't take things too seriously, and we try to have fun and things like that. So, oh, what will be the fate of Ario Hota? Generally speaking, I think Ario Hota and Ario Hota from like where the fanfic wants to take him versus like what I think George's original plan was for him is is I think George created Ario Hota, and Ario Hota is kind of a nobody character in his the first couple chapters, and people laughed at him as the camera that rise. But I think that was the if I were to guess, the point is that he would eventually awaken from his situation of being just a passive observer and gain agency, and that he would be the one that would end up stopping Doran in the end. And I kind of do fundamentally think that was like the Hota like story. I think some people think, oh, Ario Hota would just like die in his first or second point of view chapter, and that would be the end of him or something, and then we never think of him. But I don't know, like George never put any character in him. Like even Ares Oakheart, he died and you feel bad because we got to know him. If Ario Hota died at this point, we wouldn't really care that much. So I like the idea that Ario Hota has to discover himself, has to discover morality, and it's going to be up to him to stop Doran and figure out what Doran is up to is wrong. So like he's going to, in the fanfic, he's going to have a big adventurous journey, and he's going to be very important. But I don't know. How you like it? How you liking Vidor? How you liking like original Hota and fanfic Hota? How are you liking him?
Uh, Fanfic Hota is more fun. It's like the original Hota is kind of nothing. Like the chapters in which he's the camera are great, but not
Yeah,
because of him. But
not because of him, right?
yeah,
Like I do think because they're fun chapters. Like the introduction to the Sand Snakes is fun because each of the Sand Snakes is fun, and then the Watcher chapter is fun because again the Sand Snakes are fun, right? Like it's not him that's fun; it's the Sand Snakes. Yeah.
yeah. But I like how we've been dealing with Hota. Yeah, let's have a bunch of Hota chapters. Fuck it.
Yeah. It's gonna be all
Let it be
hotels.
our yeah our area or our Tyrion. Fuck it. Yeah.
If Stannis dies, would Fagon be the rightful heir as a Blackfire? Blackfire is cadet branch, just like Baratheons. Only the Targaryens were exiled. Um, so you'd have to, but okay. So if as House Blackfire, like if he's accepted as a Blackfire, and he's legitimized, let's see, you'd go back and you'd say, okay, that goes back to Nerys and Aegon the Unworthy. The problem is that since then there's been a few more closer branches. So I think you could probably say that before House Blackfire, there would be argument that House Plum, there'd be arguments that House Martell, yeah, you'd have arguments of Estermont being marrying into Baratheon and things like that. So again, like there's no hard and fast rules because do you go with primogeniture? Do you go with proximity? Like how is it all done? And there is no answer. There is no answer. So the idea is whoever has like a big army, but because he, even if you go with rightful heirs, like you can start pulling out high towers based on Rhaena. Yeah, it's Rhaena Targaryen. Rhaena Targaryen married a high tower and had 6 children. So we have no idea what happened to all of them. So there's a million. For a story that was all about Daenerys being the last Targaryen, there's just so many goddamn Targaryens. It's exactly like the Jedis. Oh my god, Luke Skywalker is the last Jedi, except for all the other fucking Jedis. Oh, except for Ahsoka and the Inquisitors and Rey and just and Leia, and it just keeps going. Keeps going. There's just can't throw a rock without hitting a Targaryen. Are you gonna read the AI Winds of Winter? AI at this point can't do the Winds of Winter. Patrick Williams, he does videos on YouTube. He recently did a video on AI, and he was talking about the AI Wes Anderson videos that you kind of see where they're like, oh, this is an AI. What did they do? He has Wes Anderson, Star Wars, Wes Anderson, Lord of the Rings, and things like that, right? And there's a lot of reasons why the AI would work on something like this and why it fails actually on a like fundamental level. Like Wes Anderson does like a lot of static shots. And so if you're trying to recreate something from AI that doesn't have static shot, that doesn't move around a lot, it lends itself well. Wes Anderson stuff is quirky. You can pop on faces of people that are always in Wes Anderson movies because you kind of know Wes Anderson movies by the cast. Like, oh, does it have Timothée Chalamet? Does it have Bill Murray? Does it have Jason Schwartzman? Oh, then it must be a movie. But the problem is that like on an actual like real set, like in a real sense, when you analyze what Wes Anderson is, it's missing the mark completely and utterly. Like Wes Anderson actually does a lot more different types of shots. He actually has a fairly diverse way to do movies. He with all sorts of different types of shots that are like moving. He does shaky cam. Wes Anderson does shaky cam. All sorts of crazy stuff. Plus, like, they're like even these titles like the Galactic Menagerie. That's not how Wes Anderson even titles movies. So it's so one of the problems is that AI can only create something based on stuff that came before. It takes something before and it tries to recreate it. We're going to pop on other faces and imagery from other previous things that exist and try to recreate and try to create some sort of blend. But there's nothing new. There's no new creativity that's going to happen. Um, you know, like this is AI generated um, Wes Anderson Avatar. Like, yes, it's very funny that Bill Murray is in Blueface, right? But like, realistically, if Wes Anderson actually created Avatar, would he do that? Like what? Like that's just ridiculous. Like no, he wouldn't. He would not do that at all. Like he would not create. Like there's no similarity there at all. Um, Between like how Wes Anderson would actually handle Avatar. This is just funny because it's Bill Murray in Blueface, and Bill Murray appears in Wes Anderson movies in the past, and therefore like he would do it. Like, but like that's not at all how he would like Wes Anderson would actually handle um, Avatar or Lord of the Rings. Like, and then it's just like the same joke here, like, oh, this is the Wes Anderson Lord of the Rings. Well, because it's Bill Murray as Gandalf. Oh, you see how it's just the same joke. Like we're just taking Bill Murray and we're shoving him in there for something for a character, and it's funny because it's Bill Murray. But like in no in app there's no apps like in its essence there's nothing Wes Anderson about it at all. So this is the thing about like AI creating like a George R. R. Martin chapter. Like it can't do it because it can only take something from the past and try to jumble it up and like create something like that way. It could never advance the plot forward. It could never come up with a shock or a fake out or any of the things that George actually does. Like, yeah, it could create a chapter. I could see AI creating a chapter where people are sitting around and there's a long food description and there's some talking about politics and um, and maybe there's some fog and it's sad, but that would be like it. Like they could only you couldn't create anything new. Um, have you considered doing a wildcard series analysis in the future like you did with Thousand Worlds? Curious how much George's influence is in there. Um, so with regards to wildcards, it depends on how you'd want to do it. Um, George actually only has about 8 wildcard stories. It's not many. Um, it might even be less. I want to say there's like 4 turtle stories and then uh there's like 4 turtle stories, the Journal of Xavier Desmond, and then like he wrote like half of a wild cards book where it's like 2 people wrote the whole book and George wrote half, and I think that might be it. But it's not there's interesting aspects to it, like with regards to like genetic engineering and stuff. Um, but it's mostly based on his own life because like the turtle is George. But I think there's stuff in there. There is, but I don't think it's like particularly special compared to any of the other George's books, like his non-Thousand World sci-fi stories and things like that. So I don't know. It's I definitely thought about it, but it's just like one of those things like gets put to the bottom of the list on all the other videos I need to make, which is just like exhausting. So, but I've read the wild card. I've read wild cards up to a point. I haven't read the recent ones, but um, it's some crazy stuff. It's crazy stuff because the other writers are crazy too. Um, like I say, there's a story about um, a guy. So there's a body swapping story called the Jumpers that come in that lasts quite a bit, where the villains can swap bodies with you and you swap bodies with them. And then they can just keep jumping. All they have to do is look at you and they swap bodies with you. And so the Jumpers swap bodies with the main protagonist. And so some of his he's stuck in the body of a girl, and his grandson ends up raping him. And you're like, "Oh god, George." like Dr. Tachyon's like grandson ends up raping him when he's body swapped into a woman's body. There's a lot of just like crazy, you know. It's not the same. It's not the same. There's just not the same. I don't know, deepness to Wild Cards. It's it's just kind of there for shock. And because like there's many writers, they can't really get into like greater themes and things like that too much. I don't know. I mean, individual stories can be okay, but um, would Lyanna Robert marriage lead to North versus Stormland's war? If he hit her, she'd leave, but would be at Storm's End gates demanding his head. Um, so this is a big like what if kind of situation where keep in mind that like we don't know, like, yes, Robert was abusive to Cersei. He was, and he's a piece of shit for that. Um, however, like he, the idea is that he wouldn't have become that person if Lyanna were around. Like he wouldn't have gone to alcohol had he not lost Lyanna. So it's one of those things where he wouldn't have been driven to that. Possibly, we don't know. You know, um, plus like other people would have been around. I don't know if he would have been. I don't know. Then again, he did it. He did that when Jamie was around, and had Jamie known it, he would have killed. He would have killed. He would have killed Robert. So would have Lyanna have left? And again, we don't really know anything about Lyanna's personality. Like we kind of assume that, oh, Lyanna is this like Arya like character, and she would have never tolerated that in the long term. But you have no idea. You have no idea what people are willing to tolerate. I mean, she got kidnapped and was put in the Tower of Joy, right? And you have no idea who, like, what they grow into. Like, we wouldn't think Cersei would stick around after getting hit either. She doesn't seem like that type of character, but she did. So I think it's a lot of that. That's a big assumption. Like, one, there's a big assumption if Robert ever hit her, if he would be driven to that. But two, there's a big assumption that Lyanna would leave. We don't know that. You know, I think it's a bit much to say like, oh, strong women don't leave, or strong women do leave. If you were a strong woman, you'd leave him. Well, that's it's kind of a simplistic view of domestic violence, but also like we have an example in the story of a strong woman who doesn't leave. So I don't know. Um, but would that lead to Storm's End, and um, the North going to war? Well, in that situation, the North just loses, right? I mean, they don't have it. Like, it's Robert versus, like, that's the whole kingdom versus the North. I mean, the North loses. The North loses at that point. But you got to remember, is Rickard still king, or is Rickard still lord? He'd be like, he might have the attitude like, who cares if he hits you, go back. Or if is Brandon like lord, he might have the opinion, yeah, who cares, he hit you, go back. So there's a lot of what ifs that we don't know what would happen. But I can tell you that North versus the rest of the kingdom, they'd lose. But um trying to send super chat with bad pun about Vic. Okay, I'll look out for things here. um oh, What is justice? These these huge ones here.
Trial by combat. That's justice.
We know that George thinks that justice is different from vengeance. That's all we know. Um, but I think that like this is the thing is I'm so behind in the super chats, Vidor, that like I'm like I think this is coming from the conversation way back where I was talking about um the different like Stannis being focused on justice and the different people from Plato's Republic. So it's a while back. Um anything in House of the Dragon season 2 that you're not excited about? Uh-huh. I'm pretty excited for House of the Dragon season 2. Um the we got Blood and Cheese, we got Rook's Rest, we've got Aemond hooking up with Blackwood. Um we've got dragon seeds, people trying to ride dragons. I can't think of anything that would like be bad. Um Vito, you got anything? On like what would be bad about season
No.
2?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Blood and Cheese is would be great to see, but would be awful to see as well.
Yeah, I
It has
guess.
to
I
be
guess
well
maybe
done.
it's one of those things like dreading the red wedding and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of. I mean, I suppose like so. First season they were like shoving in shocks for the sake of shocks, and now like the shocks are already built into the story. So I don't know how many more shocks they're going to be, but we'll see. Um,
I kind of think I don't know how will they deal with this like random characters from the Riverlands and the North, and kind of making like they probably try to make it all one character, and how would this may function? Like,
I think you're right. I think they're going to be. I think they're like if anything I'm going to dislike is that like they're going to try to streamline a lot of the plot and force things forward without all of the politics of it. Um
yeah.
and just try to make things simple. But so this server X is actually Elon Musk. I can't believe tinfoil hats prevent balding. Oh, that's true. That's true. Who do you think killed JFK? Jeez. I think that I don't think there's any conspiracy. I think that uh, um, that Oswald pretty much just acted alone. People get on this because Oswald was a really weird character, and a lot of people were watching him because he was so unstable. Um, for those who don't know, like Lee Harvey Oswald uh, was in the army, became a sniper, got really interested in communism and Russia because he was dating a Russian woman while he was stationed in Japan. He then shows up in Moscow, um, renounces his American citizenship, which causes a diplomatic crisis where both the Soviet Union and the United States are like, oh, fuck. Like, this looks bad for us. And the Soviet Union's like, we don't want to, this guy's probably a spy. Why would we accept this guy? And so there was like a lot of dealing and wheeling and dealing with the Soviet Union and the United States. And then the Soviet Union accepts the guy, but it's like, we have to watch the guy constantly. So they marry him off. He ends up getting married to a daughter of a KGB agent, and they're watching him. And then Lee Harvey Oswald lives in the Soviet Union for a while and then decides he doesn't like Soviet communism, moves back to America, and then gets interested in Cuban communism and becomes obsessed with JFK. And because so once he comes back, now everybody's like, oh, is he a Soviet spy? And so the CIA is watching him, and then he freaking like ends up killing the president. And so because he was getting watched by all of these different groups because he was nuts, everyone's like, well, there must be a conspiracy. Um, the only thing I think that's really iffy and weird is that Jack Ruby was able to get to um, Oswald. That's the only part that I think is weird. Like I maybe think there was a conspiracy to let Jack Ruby kill Oswald, but I don't think there was a conspiracy for Oswald to kill the president. Um, I've never heard thoughts on Rings of Power. Can you explain them in brief? Um, my thoughts on Rings of Power are that it's an okay mid series. It's a little forgettable. I think that the the sets and the I think it's a beautiful show. I think it's fairly well acted. I think it's got a lot of great characters. I think that it's slow and poorly paced, and that's the thing that kind of kills it. Um, like I can get over a lot of the lack of logic here and there. I can get over the 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 things they've done to the source material to push it and things like that. Um, I don't think I don't think those were the problems, and I don't think being woke was a problem or anything like that. It certainly wasn't, because actually some of the best parts of the show are actually these so-called woke characters. You know, are actually like the most entertaining parts. Um, like the fact that like the guy's wife, the Black Dwarf, is one of the best characters in the show, or the fact that like this mother character, this woman character, is leading a village against like orcs is one of the best stories of the show. Like that's the most like one of the most interesting stories, and like her like seething like her like boiling sexual tension with the black elf is like quite convincing, and I wanted to get back to that plot the most. It's just poorly paced and kind of boring. Like you have hour-long episodes that you could probably have in 40 minutes. And that's what kind of makes the show. That's what kind of makes the show mid for me. Um, that it's just an utterly boring show because it was just poorly edited. But for the most part, I don't think it's anything great. I don't think it's anything bad. So like any video where they're like the worst thing in the world, it's just like I don't know what show you were watching, because the show's fine. It's just a little dull. That's it. Which is I don't know. I wish I had an extreme like take on it, like that this is the best show or this is the worst show. I don't. It's like forgettable. It's forgettable, poorly paced. But you know, there's things that it does really well. It's a very beautiful show. It's a very beautiful show, and it's for the most part very well acted. You know, some of the dialogue's a little clunky, but um, you know, it was fine. It was fine. Um,
I never finish it.
that's the thing, right? Like it gets
Yeah,
dull. If it were
yeah,
horrible, I'd want to keep watching. I'd be like, where is this fucking mess going?
yeah, yeah. I think being mediocre sometimes is worse than just being like really bad. You know,
Yeah.
uh, because it's just dull. I don't know. Yeah.
It's also kind of my problem with rings of with I fucking hey. The Wheel of Time is also it's like a little dull. It's a little on the dull side too. Um um so alt time, Ned doesn't go south and support Joff. So
Why?
I'm trying to think like in any situation would he not go south? Um
Without the dire wolves, Caitlyn wouldn't be so paranoid, right?
right, the direwolf situation causes her to this is the weird thing is that the direwolves make her want him to go south because he doesn't want to go south. But then she changes her mind, but then he doesn't listen to her the second time. So I imagine that the direwolves that he's not going to go, and the direwolf convinces her to push him south because and so that in the original timeline, Ned doesn't go south, right? This has got to be the kind of like time traveling Bran like interferes, sends the direwolf and it makes Catelyn paranoid, as you're saying. And then, so in the original timeline, Ned doesn't go south. So somebody else's, but the letter would still arrive. The letter from Littlefinger and Lysa, but nonetheless, is that from the original timeline? But maybe he doesn't go south. So then there's some other war. Somebody else's hand. I imagine Bran grows to a much older age because he never goes south. Nobody goes south. Arya, Sansa. So yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that has to be the original timeline. Because why else? Why else send the wolf to choke on the stag to give Catelyn paranoia? Um, so they don't go south. They find out about the incest. They go to war. Stannis versus Joffrey, because Stannis is still on Dragonstone. And so maybe the North would support Stannis, and the war would come out differently. And it's just like bad, but nonetheless, it doesn't help. I guess that's how it would go, right? Um, that
I guess I guess as if Ned never looks into the incest, I don't know why he would support Stannis just because he hates the Lannisters.
right, because at this
Mm,
point, he doesn't hate the Lannisters that much, right? I mean,
maybe he would be neutral and just let it happen. I don't know.
yeah. Let's see. Well, he's got okay. So King Robert gets murdered. And then Joffrey is on the throne. Ned knows nothing about Joffrey, but he gets this letter from Stannis saying that Joffrey is a bastard. Maybe they would stay neutral. Like, how does he? How can he prove it? He doesn't have the book. Ned doesn't have the
Yeah,
book, so he's not convinced of the bastardy. Stannis has the book, or Stannis knows about it. Ned might stay neutral. You're right, because it takes the book to convince him of the incest and everything. Incest is never discovered because the crows bring. I imagine if you're not bringing the wolf, the direwolf down, you're also not having Bran climb the tower to follow the ravens, so he's not falling. And so you never have this like hatred of the Lannisters. I guess maybe Ned would even, yeah, it's just he'd be neutral, or he'd slow march his men. Yeah, so I guess they'd stay neutral and the war would go on for a while.
and
John certainly wouldn't join the Night's Watch. John certainly wouldn't join the Night's Watch. Because if Ned's not
uh,
leaving, there's no reason for John to leave.
but if Ned would decline the being a hand,
Yeah.
would he still decline Sansa and Joffrey betrothal? There's this point as well.
Ooh. They could be betrothed, but Sansa wouldn't necessarily. Would she wait until she was 16 to actually head to King's Landing to get married? Or would she go and be a ward on her own anyway? Because it makes sense if he's like there to be her dad, but like, would he need to send her away? Like Lyanna was betrothed to Robert, but it's not like she went to Storm's End waiting for the betrothal. Um, so they stay home until they're actually married. So I think he'd accept the betrothal. So, but you're right that now Sansa is betrothed to the king, and um, and so at that point, Catelyn would say, like, no, you've got to support. I think at that point, Catelyn would say, you've got to support Joffrey. And so I think Ned would support Joffrey in the war against Stannis. right? They have no reason to hate the Lannisters, and Sansa is betrothed to Joffrey, so they would support the Lannisters in that. Catelyn would convince him.
Time traveling Bran is such everything, man.
What are your thoughts on the idea of the Tattered Prince being a bright flame? So the problem with like any bright flame theory is that it's just like something we just kind of accept. Um like some people say, oh, is maybe Aegon is both Blackfire and Bright Flame. And you're like, maybe, but there is absolutely no evidence of anything with the Bright Flames. Like the Bright Flame is essentially this idea that when people talk about the Bright Flames, they talk about how Aerion Targaryen, who was called Aerion Bright Flame, um, either when he was exiled had a bastard when he was like going with the sellsword company, or his son Maegor, who just kind of disappears from the story, and was not chosen at the council, um, a council of 120 of 233. So the Great Council of 233, Maegor is talked about because he's a son of Arion, but he was not considered, and they chose Egg, right? So like so some people think like, well, maybe Maegor or some other kid that Arion Brightflame had could have married into the Blackfire line, or in this situation, like, you know, like, gone to Pentos and got, met with and somehow produced the Tattered Prince. Um, the problem is that like you could do that for any character, like literally any character. You could be like, well, they could be a bright flame. Khal Drogo could be a bright flame. You know, um, like literally anybody, like because we have no idea what they're doing.
The, the interesting thing about the Bright Flames is because like maybe they are the closest heirs to the Aryans of the Erie,
Hmm. Let's see here.
because Maegor was
Oh, right.
was was married to an Arryn, or a daughter of an Arryn.
Yeah. So Aerion Brightflame marries Daenora Targaryen, whose mother was an Arryn. Aerion's Brightflame's parents were a Dane. So you could maybe have like some sort of like Aaron Dane kind of connection there. The Danes also, Egg was a Dane as well. So like the Danes were kind of neutral on who would take the throne, but like, yeah, Daenora's mother was Alice Arryn. Um, there's just a lot more Arryn connections, and I guess in other places. I guess that's the most recent, I suppose. I guess you could try to pull it off, but not too many Aarons left, right? I mean, this is the whole idea why
No,
why uh, the Harry the Heir is coming in. Um, this is funny. Why is Moat Cailin so important if boats exist? Hmm. I suppose the idea is that, um, all right, so going with George's like in-universe explanation is that for some reason not many people bother building ships. And the people that do bother building ships like go overboard and have more ships than like anybody else could imagine. So like you've got the Ironborn and you have the Red Wines. And and that's it pretty much. I mean, the Lannisters had a fleet, and then it was burned, right? But like, I guess historically, it's just that like Valarians had ships, high like the Red Wines had ships, and the Ironborn had ships, and everybody else is like, fuck it. There's just no reason to build ships in Westeros. For some reason, like everybody just doesn't bother. The fact, even though that the North has like ungodly amounts of wood, they're just like Brandon the shipbuilder is the only one that bothered doing it. You know, um,
They're
so like
Dothrakis.
yeah, so
Secret
like
Dothrakis.
yeah, they're all like Dothrakis. They all just like are scared of the water. Um, so like you're right that like Moat Kalen, like it's for people that don't have navies. But the problem is that like everybody should at least have some navies. Now there is a moment in George's original plan where he wanted to bring the phrase north, and so they're like, let's use a bunch of fishing ships to like bring them north, to like transport people. Um, but then there's the idea that another sea power could like come down and like attack them. So I would say it is a plot hole that the North doesn't have ships, because you're right that like if they don't have any naval defense, anybody with like fishing boats can just transport your army around Moat Kalen. Now, had they had just a few ships, which they don't, but had they had just a few ships, they could like kill. They could wipe out the like the transports. But you are right that like, and it's true that like the Ironborn just take the North because like who cares? And that's it's a good point, because like when we look at the North, the problem with it is that there's just too much undefendable land, right? There's no way that the North, with their low population and all of this land, could could defend against a landing point unless they had a navy patrolling the water, which they don't have. So like when Theon takes the North, it's somewhat logical, because like he can just do that. They can just land on the stony shore and take all of these places because the Northerners were dumb by not having ships. Um, so especially in the time of like when they were a separate kingdom, they should have absolutely had a massive navy to protect their shores. Um, 'Cause I'm trying to think of like any other.
I I think George is very inconsistent with how stormy the Narrow Sea is,
Mm,
because he has like the Storm of Dragonstone, the Three Sisters, and these autumn storms that fuck Stannis. But it's very inconsistent because the Free Cities are okay. I don't know.
yeah. Also, like, um, I don't know. Like going back to this, like the in the past, the Ironborn had taken Bear Island. There's no point. There's no reason the Ironborn shouldn't have been like constantly taking stuff for years, or that like every one of the people on the coast would be like Sea Guard protecting against Ironborn raiders. Um, or on the other side, like pirates. Like it just I don't know. It just doesn't make much sense to me. I mean, I guess it's supposed to be a stand-in for England, where they just keep getting invaded by naval forces over and over again. That's like the history of England. Like, just I'm just gonna get invaded by Germans and Scandinavians for forever. It's a bit of a plot hole. It's a bit of a plot hole that Moat Kalen is so essential as this like cork, but um like no one just goes around with their ships. I mean, I could see it being like strategic, like in the sense that like the Bosphorus Straits are really strategic. That's important that people hold the Bosphorus Straits, but like there's other ways to get into Europe, or the holding Gibraltar is really important, but There's other ways. There's other ways in, and you need a navy too. And yeah, I'm gonna say that's a plot hole. That's a real plot hole. Oh, what were your general thoughts on the Waco siege back in the '90s? um, what were your thoughts on it? So at the time, I was a kid. And so, how it was framed in the news was there's this crazy cult leader who's collected a bunch of guns, and he's like, and he need, something needs to be done about him. And there wasn't really much of a question like that something should be done about it. It's only later in retrospect that you kind of go, well, did we need to go in and kill everybody? Like, what was he doing again? Like, I understand that it's a little creepy that he had this cult where he was banging a bunch of kids and like, he crossed state lines with weapons and stuff. But like, starting his place on fire and having everybody die in a fire was a pretty ridiculous way to handle it. And I understand that the fire was maybe started by accident, and it was just like there's what was the point? What was the point of it all? And it was handled very, very poorly. But you keep in mind that like at the time, there was no question that like something needed to be done, and it's kind of like, at least that's how it was framed in the media, and when we heard stories about it. So like at the time, we like you don't kind of question it. Later on, with Timothy McVeigh and his, you kind of go, oh right, Waco. Oh yeah, I guess so. I'd forgotten about that. But it's not like, Timothy McVeigh went and bombed a building with a. So he bombed a federal building in Oklahoma City. By the way, when you think like what's in a federal building, okay, you're thinking, oh God, the federal. I think Fed. I think like FBI. A bunch of dudes like no, 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 no. Federal buildings are mostly all of the little bureaucratic things that government does to like run the country. So it's like Social Security Administration was in that building, like stuff like that, like really like just bureaucratic paperwork stuff, like just nothing to do with the FBI. Like I think there might have been an FBI field office there of like 4 people, right? It's Oklahoma City. It's not that many people. Like, um, and then there was their daycare, their on-site daycare for the federal workers was in that building. So when he bombed that building and he killed 100 people, it was like a bunch of kids at the daycare for Social Security Administration employees. Like it was. So when you think of like people being dumbasses, right? Yeah, the FBI was a bunch of dumbasses. They went in and like this guy had a weird cult and he'd crossed state lines with guns. He was being creepy. Did they need to throw in tear gas and start the place on fire and have everybody die? No, that was really dumb and boneheaded. At the same time, like bombing a federal building filled with like government bureaucrats and their kids at daycare is also like is beyond worse. Like it's just like it's all bad. Like it's just all bad. Like it's just these people are all idiots. Like everybody involved in this is just idiots. Like there's better ways to handle this kind of stuff. Um, it's funny. A number of years ago, there was a bunch of guys up in Oregon that like some militia that was kind of doing the same thing, like having a standoff against like local law enforcement. And the law enforcement was like very, very patient and took time, and then like negotiated a stand down and things like that. And everybody was like, a lot of people were like, "Oh man, if it weren't a bunch of like white guys, they would have never done that." And you're like, well, just because they did it right that time, we shouldn't like point out the fact that yes, if it were a bunch of black people, they would have come and probably gone in and just killed them all. But there are ways to deal with things like in a negotiation sense, diplomatically that the FBI should have done to save a lot of innocent lives. Like obviously, having all of those people burned to death at Waco is a bad situation, and Timothy McVeigh in response is a piece of shit. He was a horrible piece of shit who went and killed a bunch of children. So like, it's it's um it's it's yeah, and innocent government workers that had nothing to do with like the situation. So um no, it's just like I don't know. Like it's just people being incompetent. Everybody being incompetent and dumb. But that's what I see it as. I don't know if there's anything beyond that. Like, these people that get all angry at government, be like, government overstep. Like, that's not what I take out of it. Like, I take out of it a bunch of fucking idiots on everybody being a bunch of fucking idiots. Like, don't buy a bunch of fucking guns and create a cult and like stash them. Like, don't do that. There's just a lot of like just horrible idiots all around, and a lot of people that died that shouldn't have died. Shaggy Dog ate Rickon's mind. Magic Dog versus toddler. Perhaps metaphorically. I mean, I think there's a situation of like where Jojen warns that if you're the wolf too much, that the wolf is going to take control of you. And so in this situation of blended consciousness that George likes to write about a lot, there's going to be a fight. And how strong is a toddler's mind versus like a direwolf? I think that it's quite likely that the wolf wins out, and that in the end, like Rickon is going to be mostly Shaggy Dog versus like himself, which is a problem going forward, as Manderley wants Rickon to be Lord of Winterfell, and he's probably freaking nuts at this point from a direwolf taking over his mind. I mean, I think like this is the whole thing about maybe even Daenerys is like sane before the dragons started like taking over her mind. That maybe we can't even blame Daenerys at the end. That wasn't really her fault. It was Drogon's fault. That the blended consciousness of things, like, and when they take over. Can't be having dire wolves and dragons ruling things. Just that's crazy. That's insane. That's insane. My problem with Rings of Power of going to spend billions of dollars on Tolkien, his writing and character descriptions is sacrosanct.
Eh, I disagree. Like mainly with this character description thing. Like, man, what are you trying
I
to say with character description?
I mean, I think people need to stop thinking that Lord of the Rings is the freaking Bible. And I mean, let's remember that, like, you know this happened. Okay, this happened. Um,
Yeah.
Frodo of the Nine Fingers. Like, this was me growing up, like, this was the most salient, like, vision I had of Gollum, and what I thought was all, you know, this character coming in at the beginning of Return of the King, singing Frodo of the Nine Fingers. Frodo of the Nine Fingers and the Ring of Doom. Like, there's no like, stuff's adapted. Stuff's adapted. Stuff gets adapted all the time. Stuff gets adapted poorly all the time. Great books get adapted poorly. Poor books get adapted well. Forrest Gump is a much better movie than book. Fight Club is actually probably a better movie than book. But stuff gets adapted, and stuff can there are sequels all the time. I mean, Hook exists as a movie. People aren't sitting there going, "Oh, how dare you do this to Peter Pan?" Hook was a piece of shit movie, but are people so angry about Hook? I think now in retrospect, people kind of like Hook, which is weird because that's a really bad movie. But let's just let's like step off and just remember that it's just a book. And Tolkien, he's just a writer. He's just a fantasy writer like any other. You know, he had a popular book, and his writing isn't perfect. There's a lot of silly, ridiculous parts of Lord of the Rings. Tom Bombadil is a thing. We all know Tom Bombadil is a thing. So give them a break. Give them a break. They're just making money, trying to adapt stuff, you know. But let's not pretend that I mean, if we're even gonna take there are bad adaptations of the Bible. There's horrible adaptations of the Bible. There's oh my gosh. There's cartoons. I think it's this one. Like Samson and Delilah and stuff like this. Like there are these horrible trash cartoons that exist all over the place that about adapting Bible stories that are just horrible, horrible animation, horrible writing, just dumb stuff. Um, and as much as the Christian community freaks out about stuff, when they do these bad adaptations, I don't see people being like, "How dare you? How dare you adapt Samson and Delilah, God's word, in such a shitty fashion?" At least they don't do that. Um, so I mean, even if you revere like Lord of the Rings, yeah, people can do shitty adaptations. Just let them do shitty adaptations. People do shitty adaptations of the Bible. People do shitty adaptations of a lot of things. So it's just there's shitty Spider-Man, there's shitty X-Men, there's shitty everything. Just let it join the club, And there were already shitty Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings cartoons were shitty. Just let it be shitty. There's plenty of shitty stuff. So it's just it's I don't take it very seriously. That's just all that's the nature of the beast. Like anything else, I don't see why Lord of the Rings is special at all. Um I love the Starks, but I think Egg's reform have turned them against the Targaryens. I'm trying to remember what Egg specifically did. I mean, obviously, um, Alisane's reforms were pretty important in the sense that it ended Lord's right to the First Night and gave away land to the Night's Watch and stuff like that. I'm trying to remember if Egg did anything.
They they don't specify. They say there are some laws to protect the small folk, but
Oh,
vague stuff. The Tywin throws away when he has
gotcha.
chance.
I see. I see. Um, yeah. Okay. I see. Many of the laws Aegon had granted bestowed on the small folk, and then Tywin undoes it. Huh. Well, it didn't help the Starks support the Lannisters in the war. Um, I mean, I think the Starks are supposed to be a mixed bag. I mean, obviously Ned is a good guy. We like Ned and the current Starks, but I think historically the Starks are supposed to be pretty brutal people. Um, like you know they've never had a female ruler. They had lords right to the first night. They had human sacrifice for a long time. They're supposed to be horrible. There's no good guys in the story. There's no good house. You're not supposed to have a team. You know, despite how the show went, where we're all rooting for Starks. Um, since George R. R. Martin basically confirmed Dance with the Dragons 2.0, shouldn't Fagon have come dragons? Shouldn't Fagon have dragons to combat with Danny? I believe so, definitely. Which is why, I think Quentin is alive. One of the reasons why I think Quentin is alive, because you need a character to deliver a dragon the um, uh, to the Aegon cause. Now, yeah, there's other ways around it. Like maybe Arch and Drink would somehow capture a dragon and bring the dragon back because they're Ironwoods and the Ironwoods were Blackfire supporters. That maybe they would do it by themselves without Quentin. But I think that yeah, the dragons get split up. I think Victarion captures a dragon, and then I think that the somebody captures a dragon to bring it back to Aegon. Because Victarion's not handing over his dragon to Aegon, or is Victarion supposed to come back and join the Aegon cause? Like he comes back and he's like, "Well, I hate Vic now, so I'm gonna support Aegon." That seems weird. I mean, I'm not saying it's not possible, but um, and then Danny would come back with two dragons and then clearly win. So you kind of need to have the three-way split, and then you need Aegon's cause. I'm not know if Aegon himself is going to be flying it, but the Aegon cause needs a dragon, and then and I think like Quentin or the Dornish are like the two Dornish other characters are a perfect vessel to bring that dragon back, to have that. But that's certainly how I'm planning the fanfic, and how I saw the story. Like just logically speaking, like you got three dragons, Ironborn are going to get one, and then you got an Ironborn Lannister alliance that I think has been set up. Just looking at family trees, and then you've got the Aegon cause getting a dragon, and then Dany has a dragon. But that's how I see it. I don't know. um, did you see Oppenheimer yet? There's a scene at University of Chicago. Yeah, I mean there ought to be. So University of Chicago is fairly famous for being their scientists being the ones that invented the atomic bomb. When you go to University of Chicago, you can buy Mushroom Cloud T-shirts. There is a monument for the site of the first controlled nuclear explosion on campus. Um, and then, hello, come on. Full house today. How's it going?
I was not going to join, but I only joined for this one super chat coming up, and that'll be it.
Okay. Um, and so, yeah, there's another movie actually that was filming when I was in college, starring Morgan Freeman and Keanu Reeves, called Cold Fusion. And they again chose University of Chicago as the site of the story because of the nuclear past of Chicago. But and so I did meet Morgan Freeman and Keanu Reeves when I was in college very briefly. Um, Keanu Reeves was a really nice guy. That's all I can say about him. You know, Keanu Reeves was a really nice guy. Couldn't really get much close to Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman had an entourage that was like, Morgan Freeman does not have time for you, and you're like, okay, sorry, you hear about the coup in Niger? Let's see. Um, oh, so it's a Nigerian military intervention behind Niger's coup. Weird. This is very weird. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of coups in especially that region of West Africa. I mean, I know Burkina Faso had one quite recently, and the coup attempt in Niger. This is the first time I'm hearing about it, but it's too bad because Niger was seen as one of the more stable countries of West Africa. Actually, so is Burkina Faso, despite it being poor. And it's just kind of a setback. Like every time you've got to you're like, oh, this region's looking good, and then another. It's also very bad because Niger is right in what we call the Sahel, like Maghreb region. Um, uh, Here, I'm gonna pull up a map. Okay, so Here's North Africa. And this is kind of important stuff if you're going to understand this area. So like the Sahara Desert, Sahara actually means desert in Arabic. So Sahara Desert is actually the desert, the desert. And then the Sahel is a kind of drier area that's more like grasslands with a tree here or there that's just below it. Now, the thing about these areas is that the central governments of these countries tend to either exist like above the Sahara Desert, where there's plenty of people and water and resources, and they kind of don't have many facilities in the areas in the desert. And the same goes with the Sahel. Like it's just not as many resources because it's a dry, arid region. You just like, you don't have many cities because the land can't support very many people. So this area of the Sahara and the Sahel does not have very much government oversight, and therefore you get resistance groups and terrorist groups that end up popping up here. This is why you hear about Al-Qaeda in Islamic Maghreb. This is why you hear about Boko Haram and things like this. It's just like off in areas that there's not much central government to. And so it being a problem. And so when you hear about Niger right here falling to a coup, it's because of that. But the problem is also like it's very impoverished. These are the people that need resources, they need help, they need tourism, they need a lot of things. And every time there's something like a coup or something like that, people just go, oh, I guess I'll never go there. It's too bad. But that's all. Was that the super chat you wanted to hear about, Carmine?
No, literally the one on top of that. You just skipped it.
What? Oh, okay.
This fucking guy.
I thought you know what I was really thinking when you were like, oh, I'm here for your next super chat. And I was like, oh, is this why Carmine wants to join? Because I'm talking about Niger.
Why the fuck would I care about Niger? What the
Now you're chuckling. You
who cares about that?
Because people make jokes about pronunciation.
Oh, I know. I'm well aware of that. I like to assume that people watching are like 7. To this guy, do you mind if I read this one?
Sure. You and Red Team Review. Oh, please go.
No, you have to read it now.
You do it. You do it. No,
you and Red Team Review should do a What You're Missing video series for The Witcher, like you did with Game of Thrones. Then he can vent his frustrations like you did while explaining how the books are better. Here's the problem with The Witcher. When it comes to me and The Witcher, I'm not going to actually, because Preston knows. You mentioned it earlier how it has like somewhat of a meaning to me. I was actually going to be forward about that, and then a couple of months ago, some dickhead brought up something that I was open about in my personal life many years ago before you and I teamed up. And I just rethought even going into it, because why am I going to be personal just for some asshole on Twitter to bring up shit and try to use it to, attack me? So I'm not going to go into why we haven't covered Witcher yet, but doing a What You're Missing series, I want to do like a big video series on it first on my own channel and do it myself. Kind of like Red Letter Media, what they did with the Star Wars prequels. Then I guess if you want to still do the podcast on it, I'm down.
Yeah. I know. It's just it's always one of those like off in the future kind of things though, because you're always like, oh, I wanted to do that, and then it's like 2 years later, you're like, I still.
No, you're right. Like other things in my life like come up and I kind of either forget about it or I get lazy on it, or it just doesn't manifest. So I do apologize to you about that. I know you get annoyed with me whenever I do stuff like that.
I mean, it's fine. Like, look, I watched season 1 of Witcher, and like
I did too,
and like I didn't watch the rest. And so when you were like, at this point, I'm like, fine. But like when I watched season 1, I was like, all right, I watched season 1. I was excited at the time. I was like, I finished season 1. I muscled through it. I'm ready, Carmine. I'm ready for the podcast. I'm ready to put something up on your channel because I know you're the Witcher guy. I got pumped because you like knew the ins and outs of Witcher. and then you're like, nah, nah,
The funny
no.
thing about The Witcher is that it's not a one-to-one adaptation like Game of Thrones on HBO tried to be. That's the problem. They fuck with the source material so much that it's just like it's kind of hard to do a what you're missing. Kind of, not really. Kind of. It'd be more me bashing the fuck out of a lot of it, and it's just it's so Hollywood. It seems like a lot of they just all they did was like a checklist. And in order to talk about The Witcher, you gotta talk about the controversies. And I know leftists are gonna get pissy with me because even the grifters have a good point about some of the controversies about it. It's and then you got to go into the casting. It's a whole like hour
Mm.
video. It's a whole. Plus, I'm also going to be very upfront. When I got into The Witcher, I got into it when there are only two books translated in English. There's like a whole bunch of books. The
Yeah.
games popularized the series. That never happened with Ice and Fire. Ice and Fire was popular before Game of Thrones on HBO. The Witcher was never popular before the games. The games catapulted it. So
Yeah, yeah,
you got to
yeah.
talk about that. You got to talk about like Polish, how like the American payment system is a giant bubble and some countries can't penetrate it. It's a whole video, my homie. It's a whole
I mean, we
video.
could, we could. I'm just saying, like an easy one. I mean, I know you're not like, but an easy one, an easy thing we could do is so you know how in this like this setup with we recorded the Twitter thing, right, where like I had a visual of the Twitter. um I could have the episode of The Witcher. We can't play the episode of The Witcher because then we'll get struck, but I can fast forward through scenes, and I can be like, okay, now we're in a scene where they're doing X. What do you remember this scene, Carmine? And then you can go on a rant, and then I can fast forward to the next scene, and then you can continue your rant, and then we can just do that through the episode, you ranting.
Right, but remember the problem with that is that a lot of the first book is anthology stories. So I don't know how we would like we could give it a shot in the future. I'm down, sure, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
All right, all
I
right, all right.
literally I literally just wanted to come on to also fuck that guy. Stop asking about the fucking Witcher, you home. Ooh, you oh my god, stop asking about the Witcher. It's coming. It's fucking coming. Ugh.
Look, I mean,
Right.
eventually, this has been like a years long thing, like twisting Carmine's arm. Like I don't even understand like deep down what's going on. Like he explains it's something crazy, like like
Don't get into this.
my father was like murdered while like what with a Witcher book, and so the Witcher has a real like emotional impact on me. I don't, it's something crazy. I lost my virginity on top of a Witcher book, and then like there's like serious like traumatic emotion with the Witcher that like Carmine has. That's like I can't even explain it.
Like I said, I was gonna be upfront with the audience because I don't mind being like upfront and personal like that. It's just that whole interaction that one time kind of threw me off. Like I know you don't give a fuck. You'll just say where you are at any point in time on stream on the planet. I like after a series of weird interactions, I would
Yeah.
rather just keep like yeah, just
No, I
not go into
understand.
it too
I
much.
understand. I understand. You know, because you got these sketchy people coming out of the woodwork that are like, Carmine, you're famous, and you're like, how am I? No, like I
I love
get
Trey's
it.
thing. Look, Trey on his Twitter, he's like a Z-list celebrity. By the way, real quick before I hop off, you said you wanted to do like a George R. R. Martin Elden Ring video. Is that why you asked me about it on Facebook?
Yeah, I'm probably gonna do a George R. R. Martin Elden Ring video. The problem is that like I wanted to do like a throwaway one where I'm just like
Hmm.
briefly go over it, and now I'm like, oh god, if I do that, people are gonna be like, you don't know anything about Elden Ring. So now I'm gonna be like, oh fuck, I've got to have it like be more detailed and correct. I don't want to get any of the facts wrong. But then if I get to the point where I'm not getting any of the facts wrong, now I know everything about Elden Ring, and it's like, well, I might as well make a bigger video. So I don't know. I don't know.
If you have any
But
questions about The Witcher, or not The Witcher, fuck! If you have any questions about Elden Ring, you can ask Will, the editor,
yeah,
'cause I
yeah,
know
I know.
he's
He's the
played it
one that talked
multiple
to me about
times.
it first. But like it's just like, I have this video that I'm gonna release called like George R. R. Martin phoned in Elden Ring, and it's just like, and I did a tweet about it because I was quite excited about this idea that um like like Elden Ring is literally a story about a giant tree that's at the center of their religion, that where you die, your souls are absorbed into the tree. Yeah. And I like the first time I heard about this, I was like, man, imagine you like spend millions of dollars to hire George Lucas, and you're like, all right, write the backstory to our tale. And he's like, I've got this idea, and it's about this battle station that can destroy planets. You know, and I'm like, really? That's your first fucking idea? Your first fucking idea is a tree where if you die, all the souls go into it at the center of the religion. Like, really? Really? Like, they paid it like they cut a check for how much money for him to come up with that?
I actually did know about the tree thing. I don't know anything about Elden Ring. It's one of those games that's on the list. I got a bunch of games I got to play. I got to play Red Dead too. I got to play a bunch of shit. But no, yeah. Editor Will, he knows a lot about. I know nothing. By the way, that tweet you did, I swear it put George R. R. Martin trending for me, because he was not trending for me before that tweet you put out.
I just don't know, because like I didn't like, I don't know, only like 10,000 people saw the tweet, but like, you know, it's not like I have. But Elden Ring. There's the tree. The Erd tree. You know. So it gets worse. Like the first person you fight is like Godric of the Golden Lineage, and he's got a big Lannister symbol on his axe. And you're like, okay, man, golden, man, okay. And then the next person you fight is like a wolf person. You know, and you're like, oh my gosh, you really fight a Lannister and then a Stark like as your first bosses? I'm like, yeah. No,
Are you sure? See, I don't want to say that George R. R. Martin came up with all of this. Maybe the people behind the game are fans of George R. R. Martin.
No, they were. That's why they got him. But it's like, yeah, they were like, oh, big fan, and like the guy that created it, the Japanese guy, like is a big fan of Fever Dream, and like, yeah, and so he's like, he wanted to get George R. R. Martin. And then George R. R. Martin just like vomits like his greatest hits. And now people like somebody pushed back and they're like, but it's still a good story. I'm like, yeah, it's a good story. It's George R. R. Martin. He fucking recycled it. Like, you know, it's fine. It's a good story. It's just the same fucking story. You know? Like there's like a dead festival city where you're just like, oh, it's Croyane and Dying of the Light. Like, oh, you know, like every moment. Like, oh, by the way, like that first boss, the Golden Lineage guy, he rules Stormvale on the cliffs of Stormhill.
I didn't realize that at all. Okay.
Yeah, and the Wolf Girl, she rules a half-melted castle that was melted by a dragon.
Okay.
It gets,
I feel like
it gets
you're making
bad.
all
It
of
gets
this
bad.
up.
Like I say, like this is like a whole video.
Will, where are you? He's making this up, Will. He's making that. There's no way. There's no way.
Vitor, you haven't played Elden Ring? I don't know. Like, I'm just looking for someone else to back me up.
No, never played it. Never played it.
Damn it. But I'm just like, the more I read, the more I'm like, oh no. They did that. Oh no. Oh. It's like
This is definitely a video you got to make. Now you have to make it.
I know.
To the people saying, why doesn't Preston just play the video game? He's explained this 1,000 times already. You get way too into games and then you don't do anything
I
else.
should, but it's also like the format and getting it filmed and everything. I would have to like do it on I don't have like what's it on? Elden Ring.
Everything. PC. I don't think it's on Mac.
So I'd have to
PC,
get like a
Xbox.
PC emulator. Can I do Elden Ring?
No. Just get Xbox Series X or PlayStation 5.
Yeah, you have to do. Yeah, I'd have to do boot camp.
Boot camp? What?
The only way for Mac users to play Elden Ring to install Windows for free on Mac using Boot Camp. Boot Camp is a free utility in Mac OS that allows you to partition your Mac and run a hard drive and run Windows on it. That allows you to boot your Mac to either Mac OS. But then if I boot it to Windows, I couldn't run my
Ecamm
thing. Yeah, my Ecamm. Yeah, I mean, I could do a thing where I watch somebody, like people have streamed themselves like playing the whole game. I could watch somebody else's stream, but like, you know,
It would be it would be fucking phenomenal if we could both get on Elden. I don't have the game yet. It would be phenomenal, but because Elden Ring is co-op, so we could fucking take on like all the bosses, just you and me. But it's a Souls game, and they're tough. They're
Yeah.
tough Souls games. So
Yeah.
okay, I just came on just to say that. I will talk to you later. Peace out,
Okay.
guys.
Sounds good. Um, favorite story of the Bible. The stories of the Bible are kind of ridiculous. I guess I like the one about there's a story where um Tamar, I think is her name, and like Tamar, she gets married to this they marry her off to like this one dude and then he dies. So they're like, okay, well, I guess because you're a widow, you've got like your younger brother Onan needs to marry you instead. But Onan doesn't want to marry her, or he doesn't want to have kids with her, so he keeps like pulling out and coming in the dirt, and which is where the term onanism comes from. And so he gets smited for pulling out and coming in the dirt. And so Tamar is a widow again. So she pretends to be a sex worker and travels to this like city where her dead husband's dad is. Is that is that let me see here.
Man, I never heard about this.
Yeah. So first Tamar marries but is wicked for unknown reasons. So God smites him, and so she has to marry Onan, the younger brother, and then Onan either masturbates into the dirt or keeps pulling out and coming into the dirt, and so she wasn't getting pregnant. So God smites him for spilling his seed outside of Tamar. And so then she goes and pretends to be a sex worker while her father-in-law is traveling, Judah. And so she sneaks in and like has sex with her father-in-law, and then comes back and she's like, yo, I'm pregnant. And he's like, how dare you have sex outside of wedlock? We should kill you. Judah's like this. And she's like, actually, motherfucker, it's yours. And he's like, okay, fine. I guess I'm gonna have to marry you. And like her kids, like, and then she has like her kids like Perez and Zerah. But yeah, that's my favorite story of the Bible because it really teaches the Judeo-Christian values really really well, and so that's my fave. That's my absolute fave. You know, um, let's see here. I'm trying to see. This is Tarkovsky or Bellatar. These are Russian film directors, and I don't think I've seen anything. I've seen Solaris, which is Tarkovsky's, but I haven't. I don't know if I've seen anything by Bellatar. He's Hungarian, I guess. Have I seen anything? Yeah, I guess I am not the biggest like film buff, you know, where I'm just like seeing these classics and these like actual incredible genius directors. I've just been watching trash.
You never seen Stalker by Tarkovsky?
No, I've never seen Stalker.
Man, Stalker is better than Solaris.
Okay,
Way
okay.
better. things happen in Stalker. Things don't
Solaris
happen in
is a bit
Solaris.
slow. Is a bit slow. Yeah.
Oh, I have some problems, but yeah, I like
Soviet science
the
fiction. Yeah.
there's an interview on Tarkovsky talks about Solaris saying that it's like it's a it's like the communist future
Ah.
without war, without poverty and anything, like real communist and stuff like that. No, but I don't know if you can put this no conflict idea in this way. It's a little bit machista too, Solaris. I think like the
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah,
Um. Star Trek, I guess, takes that. I mean, it's of the time period, considering that, like,
yeah,
Gene Roddenberry is like, also like coming up with these ideas around the same time. It's funny, like the '60s and '70s, the intellectual communists, like, how they envision the future, um, and I suppose like one of the nice things about Star Trek and what people really like praise about Star Trek is that, or at least when we go, I'd say up to Next Generation Star Trek, like that the future is a great place. Like humanity got better. Like there's something to look forward to. Like it was a hopeful
yeah.
view of humanity, um, that where they are communists in Star Trek. But it's funny how now like all views we have of the universe and the future, where they're so negative. Everything's dark and grim and horrible, and like we think of Warhammer 40K and stuff like that. Like how bad can it get? But can it get even worse? How bad can it get? We don't have too many futures where everything is fantastic, because then what's the story, right?
It's apocalyptic times
Yeah.
again. Yeah.
Um, Okay, and so next I have like Miyazaki films. I have for Miyazaki films, I've seen Spirited Away. I've seen some of Totoro, My Neighbor Totoro. I have not even seen Howl's Moving Castle. Oh no, I saw Princess Mononoke. I guess I've seen a lot of these. Surprising. Okay. Okay, so I've seen they're good. I like them. I like them, but I do have to be in a certain mood to be in my anime, um, um, especially like as I say, like sad, sad, thoughtful anime like mode. I understand anime like so many different types, but I've got to be in a certain mood. But I definitely liked it. I definitely liked it. There's a town here in Taiwan that they claim is the influence for Spirited Away that I went to. Uh, but then it's actually a complete lie that the guy like never visited there, and that he was just basing it on like any random town in Japan that this town happened to look like as well, because um, Taiwan was colonized by the Japanese, and so there are some like little towns that have both also Chinese influence. Some small town China can sometimes look like small town Japan too. So, but um, but yeah, no, I'm big fan, big fan. Okay, no gods. There we go. What do you think time traveling Bran's relationship with the children of the forest is? Are they allies? Do they share the same objectives? I do not think they share the same objectives. If that were the case, there'd be more honesty and upfront. They'd be more honest and upfront with Bran. I think there's some sort of secret that the children of the forest have. Like in the show, they just went with, oh, we got the secret that we were actually responsible for the Armageddon because of the others. But I think it's something beyond that. I think when I read Ice and Fire, if I were not influenced by the show, I'd be like that line about how like the children, that man would be wroth line from, you just got to think like, shouldn't the children be wroth. And it does somewhat fit with the others that they were wroth, and their anger led to the others and the Armageddon, and that was a mistake. And they don't want man to make the same mistake. But the but I think they're trying to manipulate and trick Bran. And in the end, like, why would he need to take the time traveling step? If it were just like him and the children teaming up, would he need to take the time traveling step? Maybe. I don't know. I kind of feel like they have a plan to rule the world and get rid of people and have man like fight against themselves while they sleep and wait, to wake up one day, That's the feeling of Bran 3, that you've got all these like children asleep underground and they're waiting for something. They're waiting for man to kill themselves so they can come to the surface again. But then you got time traveling Bran, who seems to be trying to fix everything. So I would think that they're trying to keep something from him. Because here's the thing is also, like, if the children knew about time travel, they would have told Bloodraven and they would have been time traveling earlier. So Bran has this other extra secret element that the children don't even have. So I don't think that they're allies. I think the children are trying to use Bran. But we'll see. Anyway,
They probably don't even know the time traveling Bran, right?
Right.
An interesting question would be like, what if they discover it? What would they do?
You'd think they'd freak out. Yeah.
A three-eyed crow that time travels.
I mean, in a sense, he's sitting. Well, another thing I thought about is somebody mentioned a few streams back that maybe Ice and Fire happens in the Thousand Worlds universe, and the reason that Old Earth is quarantined is because there is a time rift on Old Earth, and they don't know how to fix it, and so they just quarantine Earth, and the rest of the galaxy can continue on, and that Bran is the time rift. And I was like, that's interesting, but it made me think of if like something worse than the others, right? Like what would be worse than the apocalyptic like frozen over Earth with the others living, and you're like, oh, time rift that like destroys like the mere existence itself. That's even worse. Okay. So I think they would be against time travel. I think they'd be against it. I think they would think that's messing with too much. But I don't think they're going to discover it. I think Bran stumbles into time travel by accident. So moon meteors, bro, thoughts? So I don't know much about the moon meteor theories, but from what I've heard, at least that like some think that one meteor was some think that one moon meteor like broke the arm between Dorne and Essos, right? If I'm getting that right. And that maybe other moon meteors did other crazy things. And my only problem with the theory is that it's just not necessary. Like on our own Earth, we had a land bridge between Asia and America. And, there was climate change and glaciers melted and the arm got flooded. So like, there doesn't need to be any breaking of the arm. Like a very simple climate change situation that happened on our own Earth at the same exact time period, because we're talking about something that happened 12,000 years ago in the Ice and Fire story. Our land bridge existed 12,000 years ago. And then, when the glaciers melted and oceans rose, like it disappeared. And so it's like the same thing can happen with the arm of Dorne. So there's nothing that necessitates a moon meteor in that situation. Now there might be other moon meteors. I don't know, but like I don't know it too much. Let me see here. This is the idea that there were two moons, I think, and one cracked open and produced the dragons, and like meteors came down on Earth and everything, doing all this stuff. Um, but I don't know. It seems pretty and that's what like created the seasons to be off, was this moon breaking up. Um, but I don't know. If it's something like the moon breaking, I don't see how they're fixing that by book's end. Like, which is why like I kind of see like it's got to have something to do with the wall or the others, right? Rather than like the moon. So I can't see the uneven seasons being something that had to do with the moon, just because you can't fix it. And then all these other little things like Hardhome happening, or the Doom of Valyria. Like there's other better explanations. Like I think that, you know, I think nuclear bombs make more sense. I think that the faceless men like causing volcanic eruptions makes more sense. You know, I think uh just natural climate change makes more sense. You know, so I don't know. I just don't see it that the moon meteors are necessary. Um, what's my Duolingo streak at? And I think it's at um, 512. 512 is my Duolingo streak. But I should be doing it more than I do. But I do it at least, you know, once a day. Um, oh, thoughts on affirmative action at universities. I'll get to that. Let's make sure I'm getting all my super chats. My thought of affirmative action at universities. Having a diverse um, having a diverse student body is essential for university education. Essential. Like when I think of the things I learned as a dumb 18-year-old from, you know, like just random people from different walks of life, that I just would have never had that exposure to. Like it was essential. It was needed. It was needed. In my dorm, there was like my college freshman class had six black men, and one was in my dorm, and I had a lot of conversations with him late at night studying, and completely different way of seeing the world, completely different like ideas, like stuff that like just, you know, now I'm 46 and I've known many more black people, but keep in mind I was like 18 years old. Like, the black people I knew grew up in white areas of town, you know, and so it was very, very different. Like talking to him, and I'm very thankful for him. He actually ended up dropping out after the first year, but like it enriched my education infinitely that I was stuck in a dorm with people from all sorts of different places. And you know, that's needed. Now, the thing is, do I think the affirmative action case at the Supreme Court is going to have any effect on things? I don't. Like the people running university admissions are very smart. They know how to like change things up where it's like, oh, it's, well, if you write an essay about like hardship and adversity, like, and then they're gonna look for the frickin' right things. They're gonna create a diverse student body, and the student bodies aren't even very diverse. Like when I'm like, oh, it's essential. Like these affirmative action cases, like they're really just picking on like the wrong group. Like, you know, at these big universities, they're overwhelmingly like Asian and white, and overwhelmingly like legacy donations. you know, and a bunch of, and then after that, after the legacy donation people, you've got a bunch of people that spent all of their time studying, so they could get their 1600 SAT and get into college. What kind of enriched like education, like social education about learning the world, are you going to get from that group of like dweebs and dorks and like rich privileged people? Like, what kind of education are you going to get? Like, I went to university, and the people I met, I met like, you know, Lois over there, who has never been on a date because she spent all of her high school like studying and like has never done anything except like seen the inside of her room. And then over there it's you know, Hamilton, whose family is like a millionaire. Like, what is that going to tell me about the world, you know? So it's really needed that you have these things. And university boards, they're gonna figure that out. But even what they're doing, they're not doing enough of it. Like I say, my freshman class, 1,000 people, 6 black men, 6. Like, that's it. And it was like 30 black women. Like, that was it. You know, still overwhelmingly white and Asian. You know, overwhelmingly like filled with a bunch of dweebs who like who did nothing but study. You know? So it's important that you pull in people from different walks of life, you know. And I understand people are like, well, it should always only be the best of the best, you know. You're like, how are you measuring it? How are you measuring things? Like, you know, somebody that studies and memorizes all of like words so that they can do an analogy on an SAT and know that like horse is to masticate, as like, you know, like as shovel is to what, like what, yeah, that's education, but it's not helpful. It's not helpful. So what I'm saying is that like for my own education, thank goodness there was like affirmative action and like where I got to meet interesting people. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. Because I would have left college a dumbass otherwise. But like I say, I don't think the actual case is going to do anything. I think it was stupid that it was put forward. I think it was fundamentally like will have no change on the world. Deep Space Nine was the best Star Trek series. I agree. I love Deep Space Nine, though I admit that it's not very Trek. Like, and when I say Trek, I mean like positive thinking about the world in the sense that the world's going to be better. That each episode is a different social question about, you know, where technology or politics that like makes us think about life. I mean, it was an arc story about mostly like a war with the Dominion, so like I love it, but it's not exactly a Trek. There's various Trek episodes, but you know, it's not exactly Trek. Let's see here. They've already moved on to a different model. That's true. What Earl is saying here is they saw this coming. They saw this coming. You know, you can't. And that's the thing as well, is, and I'm happy they moved on to that different model, because I'd rather see an actual black person from the inner city who's had a hard life go to college and enrich somebody's experience than a black guy who's son of a rich family who grew up rich as well around white people. You know, because he's going to the university, he's not really adding anything. They get to claim that he's black, but you know, he's not really adding a different perspective. And so like I'd rather have that, you know. I'd rather have it really based on like experience, you know. This is why we need to bully nerds into being social. It's the only way. I literally had classes in university where I was the only woman. Yeah, especially if you're going to do science, you know. But the thing is, it's like, thank goodness you were there. You added so much education to other people. This is one of the weird things is I do hear about people, they get upset and angry and fed up about having to educate other people. Like, you'll see videos that are like, you know, Google it. I'm not here to educate you on my culture. And I was like, okay, if you want their education to be based on Google, like, you're doing nobody any favors. Like, it's kind of all of our jobs to educate each other about like where we come from and our perspectives, and like in order to like, improve like empathy and sympathy. But like, and so like, I understand it's kind of weird, like, this that this poor black guy from the inner city that gets into a university, like, all of a sudden he's thrust into this I have to freaking educate everybody role. But it's like, yeah, sorry, like, yeah, you do. Like, you have to educate everybody. It's not going to get better unless you do. So, but um thoughts on Twin Peaks and or David Lynch in general. I used to be a big Twin Peaks fan, and then I don't know, my interpretation of Twin Peaks turned out not to be right, and then I kind of looked back at my interpretation of Twin Peaks, and I was like, yeah, that was probably not very good. Um, I do like David Lynch. He's entertaining and interesting. I don't seek out his stuff because eventually you kind of get to the point where you're like, well, that's just too weird. Like, you understand his weirdness, like, adds something to it, and when he holds himself back and makes things only slightly weird, which I think Twin Peaks was him holding himself back, because most David Lynch stuff goes full on, and Twin Peaks I think is good because it was like, it was a little, there was more realism in there. So I think he's best when he actually waters down his stuff. When he goes full David Lynch, you're like, what's going on? But
Ah,
you disagree.
I completely disagree. I love Weird Lynch. I think. Did you watch the season 3 of Twin Peaks?
I did
The new
not.
one.
I never got around
Man,
to it. I only watched the first two
man, it's
seasons. Yeah.
great. It's great. It's completely different. In a good way. I loved it. It's like an 18-hour movie. It's amazing.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
heard
and
I
and
I heard they found a way
I,
to bring back Laura Palmer, or at least the actress.
yeah, uh, Laura Palmer is still at the heart of it, even though the story has moved on, But at the end, it doesn't. But it does. It's very ambiguous. I don't know, and I think it's kind of like George,
Hmm.
in a way. This sadness, the violence, the bittersweetness, because like and it made a proper ending, but without concluding.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of I differently than you, like my what I know of George's endings to stories come from you, but like this idea of, I don't know, stopping in an anticlimax, or not resolving things, but not giving closure, but giving a powerful experience at the end.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah, I think there's
this.
a real focus on like the feeling and the human condition, and like the relationships, rather than the actual like resolving the plot. Like, what, in college I directed this play called Ghost in the Machine, and it's ambiguous in the story whether this one character like manipulated data or not. And it's like, and I was like, and the actors are like, well, which is it? Did she do it or not? And I was like, it's not important. It's what's important is that the relationships broke down. The ending of the story is the relationships broke down, not that whether she did it or not. And they had a tough time with that. But um, I think you're right that Lynch, like, the logic of the plot is not important. It's the feeling that you're getting to feel the characters. And everything. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe I should watch season 3. Everybody says it's incredible, but
It is. It is.
Yeah. Um, let's see. I work for an Ivy League institution. Everyone is talking about how to comply with the law while not changing their goals. Yeah, exactly. Do you recommend the University of Chicago? Yeah. I mean, and keep in mind, I don't know if like things are different now, but for me, it was like University of Chicago. They were like the university that was willing to accept the really weirdos. You know, like if you're like keep in mind that like when I was applying to college, um, the most of the essays are pretty standard. They're like who would you have dinner with, like talk about what important person in history is important to you, talk about a challenge in your life. And then University of Chicago had an essay that was like write a creative writing story and use the first line. I never knew they could do that with ordinary string. The University of Chicago, a rubber ball, and then they like listed a bunch of stuff. And I was like, huh. And so I wrote this creative writing. I wrote this story, and it was a reach school. It was my number one. It was my number one choice, but it was a reach. And and so I was accepted, and I was like, whoa, and I was like, and I couldn't believe it. And I guess it was just from that really good essay, or something. And then when I got there, I was like, it was just like the entire student body seemed to be weird and odd, and so I enjoyed. Um, yeah, I'm still proud of my Give Chicago unconventional essay that I wrote when I was 17. Yeah, it was weird because it felt like there was a culture of taking in unconventional people, like really zany people. Now, keep in mind, it was a lot of people that was like University of Chicago was the safety school, and they didn't get into Harvard, Princeton, Yale, you know, um, and so it was a lot of weirdos, and I liked that. I never felt sorry for anything that came out of my mouth. Like you never had to worry about being pretentious or weird or saying something odd because everybody that you were talking to was crazier and more nuts than you, you know? And that was very refreshing that you could just say whatever and somebody be like, okay, and I'm going to talk about this and I'm going to talk about something crazier. And then you're like, whoa, you're nuts. Um, I, it was also really weird that they made professors teach so much. So you had small classes, but you also had these like angry professors who were constantly having their assumptions questioned by 18-year-olds who knew nothing. And so it was almost like this thing of annoying the professors. Like you're going to have an 18-year-old ask like fundamentally, but why do you think this? And you have to like explain it to them, and they never could. But but I had a lot of I had a lot of like people angry at me because like professors angry at me because I was a dumb 18-year-old. They should have been, but it was a weird experience. The weather was horrible. Um so it was I'm happy I went. I don't know if like everyone would be happy there because it's a cold place that was very rigorous. There was a lot of all-nighters. A lot of professors telling us that we were stupid and me feeling like I was stupid. You go through high school and all the teachers are good teachers and they're like, wow, you're really great, and then you get to college and somebody that's a bad teacher like doesn't understand your work and is like, you're an idiot. And you're like, oh, Jesus. So, hmm. Um, I just realized my abusive ex got me into A Song of Ice and Fire by making me watch Game of Thrones. That's a Yelp yikes for me. Um, Here's the thing about bad exes. You got to remember that like bad exes, yeah, they suck in the grand scheme of things, but it's not like they're wrong about everything. Like it's not like you're like, "Oh my god, my ex, they use toilet paper. Therefore I need to stop using toilet paper." Like, This is the whole like Hitler toilet paper thing. You can't just compare everything to Hitler because Hitler used toilet paper. You can't be like, well, the Nazis used toilet paper, and then go against it. Like, it's there's not. So it's the same kind of same thing with exes. Like, just because an ex liked something or thought it was great doesn't mean you should like go the reverse, or even like getting you into a Song of Ice and Fire. Not everything. Like, obviously, when you got into the relationship with them, there was something positive that you saw in them. And, so there clearly was something good about them. It's just that you eventually found out the bad thing, so. This is a weird one. Unless you're Ted Kaczynski, you probably aren't that smart at 18. No, it's pretty dumb. Pretty dumb now. We're all dumb. We're all really dumb. Mine was the reverse. Most of my teachers in public school were mean, and the college profs didn't give a fuck. So a lot of times you'll get a prof that like, a lot of times you get a prof that like is more interested in their research, or a TA who's just like, he has to do this for money and he doesn't care, So I mean, them not giving a fuck is also like they weren't trained teachers. Like the big difference between like high school and middle schools, those are trained teachers. Like that's what, they should be good at what they're doing. So the fact that you had like crap teachers or mean teachers in high school might be a bad thing, but you should expect college professors and college TAs to be bad at what they're doing because they're not trained what they're doing. They're not trained. Preston, get into the online dating advice market. I can probably I feel like it's one of those things where I'm very experienced with it, right? So like, I got married fairly late, so I did a lot of dating, a lot of unsuccessful dating, but you learn, you don't know, you learn a lot about who you like and who's good as a person, what things you valued before and how they change over time, and what you learn from them. Like I have an ex that I had in my 20s that she was fine, B+ relationship, but like at the same time, had I not had her, like I would have just to teach me how to be a boyfriend, to teach me how to be a husband, like I'd be a wreck. So it's like, thank goodness she existed and was tolerant of me and things like this. And she's fine. She got married. She has kids. She's doing well. But like, it's like, thank goodness she was a good enough person to tolerate me in my 20s so I could learn from her. Telling people they're dumb isn't just UFC, it's Chicago. Maybe. But man, I had this one prof. He taught us economics history, which was part of our core requirement. And we come in, we've all done the reading, which is rarity, and he's like, all right, what mechanisms in capitalism make people more equal? And we're talking about how like over time as people like went west and over like economic like inequality became greater and things like this, and then then you had more division of labor and things like this over time. And we're all just sitting there like dumbfounded, like racking our brains, And then he's just like, every year they're just letting in like dumber and dumber kids, and he just like storms off. And we're all just left like, what the fuck was that? Like he like let us stew for like 20 minutes and then storms off. The answer was there is no mechanism, but like why he needed to sit there and like let us stew and like berate us for being idiots. We find out later that he was like going through a divorce and he was not in a good place, but I'm 33, still single, haven't dated much. It's not hard to like jump into it. I was really insecure. There's a lot of things that you think are really difficult when you haven't done it, and then you just kind of like do it. I remember before I had my first kiss, I was like, do I even know how to kiss? Am I gonna fuck it up? It was easy. You know, I was the same thing with sex. I was like, am I gonna fuck it up? I don't know what to do. There's some things I fucked up, but it wasn't really that. It wasn't that bad. So like, it's the same with like, I think it's the same with dating. Like you don't really, it's not that hard. You know, it's not that hard. It's just like honest to God, it's like hanging out with somebody, asking them questions, being supportive. You know, that's it. You know, so it's you know, it's there's various things you learn later, like um when you're in a very long serious relationship, you have to like take Tina Turner to heart a bit. And like, and when I say that, I mean, she has a line, I don't care what's wrong or right, I just don't want to fight no more. There's you have to learn to say you're wrong and say you're sorry when you're not. And I'd say that's the biggest step from hanging out with people and dating and like and like hanging out with your friends to like being in a relationship, like a serious relationship that needs to last for years. You need to like really understand that there are moments where you're wrong or where you're right, but it doesn't matter because being right is not important, and you have to just apologize when you're right and move on. And that's the thing. So commitment's the worst. Yeah, you know, once you find somebody that like you think is a pretty good deal, you go with it. I just think you just haven't come up with anybody that you think that you know isn't a good deal, you know. So um I'm waiting until I'm married. I'm still a virgin. My brother, my age is 27. Um, you know, it's not that there aren't lots of people out there, but I don't think it's important. Um, like that's not the. I don't think like there's any. I don't know. Like I don't. I think you're holding something on a pedestal that's not um, like that important. You know, like it's it's not this precious special thing. You know, it's not this thing that like God is caring about. Like, oh, you broke some holy seal. It's not some like special wonderful moment like of your life. Like it's just let it just like remember that like it's not that big a deal. It's just sex. Like because it's and there, you know, I've met plenty of people that lost their virginity late. People in their early to mid 30s that lost it. It's not unusual. It's just like I say, if the thing holding you back is you think this is something precious that you're waiting to like have for marriage, I think you're going to be a little disappointed. Um, that's all. I understand that there's various like religious reasons and stuff, but I just don't. I mean, I'm not a religious guy, but if it's for like the preciousness special reason, not a very good reason, honestly. Um. So anyway, let's do one more, and then I'm gonna. I find more gay men attracted to me than females. So here's the thing. There are some people that have said that men, I don't believe this, but I'll say that there is a saying that men have sexuality and women don't. And so like women just don't find anybody attractive. And so it's probably be pretty easy. Like there's a segment of people that like don't believe lesbians really exist. They're just sick of men, you know, like it seems like it's easier for them to like just jump over. I don't believe this, but I think that I think there's something to it. I think that like men are more interested into like pursuing attraction. And it might be a cultural thing, it might be a biological thing, but like looks are just very focused. And women, like I say, when you say like they're not attracted to me, it's not. It's like you want these women to like be like, oh, I want to be on you and like jump you. And there's a few women like that out there. There are, but for the most part, women are pretty chill and laid back when it comes to like attraction. They're not ready to like jump you and knock you against the wall. A few are, but like, so like, don't take it as an insult. Like that women don't seem attracted. Like they're not looking, they're looking for the full package. They want the successful, confident, like, guy that they can have a child with. There's all these other factors that women think about. That like, where they're like, who they're willing to bang is like not top of the list. Like, while for men, it's top of the list, So I don't know. It's like I say, it's a huge stereotype, but it's just, it's, I don't know. I think because I run into a lot of men that have this thing, like women just don't seem to be into me. Women just don't seem to be into me. Well, I think you're looking for a cue that's like your own cue. Like when you're into a woman, you're like, I'm attracted to them. I want to bang them. And like women aren't hardwired that way. They're not going to react the same way back necessarily. And you just kind of have to accept that, So, all right, I'm going to have this. But women don't like me because of my opening line is about how 9/11 was an inside job. And they're not base enough to understand. Yes. But it's all fine. All right, everyone, I've been on here for 3.5 hours, so I'm gonna say goodbye. Thank you all for being with me, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye, man.
Oh, bye, Vito. Thank you for coming
Yeah,
on.
I was quiet in relationship advice and stuff like that because.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
All right, we'll see you everybody next time. Thank you, Peter.